All right. So we got people filtering in 36, 42, 44 so far.
Okay.
What's up, everybody? Hey, David. Hey, Annie. Annie, you're in here twice. That's dedication. Darian, what's going on? That's a familiar face.
Hello, hello.
Hussein, I know you. Oh, Jay Del Rosario is in here twice too. Interesting.
Something's going on.
Right.
Is there a question? Somebody's already got their hand up. Annie, you have a question? How do I do that? There it is. Hi, Annie.
All right, guys, we're going to get this thing kicked off here in a minute. Luckily, we have expanded the number of people that we could have on these live calls. We're actually doing this webinar style. So I'm going to give you some logistical information real quick, and then we'll launch into the content. First things first, if you have a question, don't put it in the chat. If you put it in the chat, it's going to get lost. So make sure that you put it in the Q&A part, and that is right in the middle of your screen. We'll be monitoring that. I'll answer some via text, and then we'll answer questions at the end. And really, we want this to be more of a back and forth. So if you have a really, really good question, we'll promote you to a panelist, and you can have a discussion with Chris. There are 10 panelists in the room right now, and all 10 of them were the first 10 who purchased the course. So they get to have access to Chris. So thanks, guys. That was huge. I couldn't believe that we sold out 10 so fast. It was like within like 4 minutes. So
huge,
awesome.
huge.
All right, so that's Q&A. I'll be monitoring the chat while Chris does the lecture. But like I said, if you have a question, make sure that you put it in that Q&A box. What we're going to do today is we're going to cover the basics of putting together a stylescape, and we're going to get into your homework assignment for the week. And then on Friday, we're going to actually critique things. So this is the information that you need to go do your job. And then on Friday, we'll see how well you did. And all the submission guidelines and everything will follow. So with that, Chris?
Yes, sir.
Take it away.
So I'm going to share my deck. I think that's how I'm going to do this. Is that how I'm going to do it? No, I'm going to share my screen. Let me close all these extra doodads here. If I share this screen, I believe it'll work. Then what I have to do is hit play on this side.
And just in case you guys were wondering, the only people that we can see on camera are the panelists, and you will know if you've been upgraded to a panelist. So we can't see you right now.
Okay, Ben, so you're seeing all the doodads on the top too, or is this displaying correctly or no?
What I see is the deck. So the Future Stylescapes course and nothing else.
Okay, nothing's cut off, right?
Nope.
Beautiful. Okay, let's launch into this then. We're recording. Hey guys, welcome. Welcome to the Future Stylescape course. And here's the very ambitious agenda that I have for you in the next 60 to 120 minutes, okay? And the parts that are most relevant to you and actually how to do the stylescape will be covered in points 3 to 8, 3 to 8. Okay, so I'm going to give you a brief intro and overview. First of all, thank you very much for signing up to be part of this course. The number of people who decided to purchase this has blown me away. It's been amazing to hear your support. Now, I want to share a really quick story that you guys may have heard before, but I'm one of these people who I've been running my company for almost 2 decades. I learned about how to do stylescapes, and it radically changes the game in which I'm playing. And there's the moments before that I can look back in my history, and then the moments that I'm in now and looking forward. And I can say that there's a very distinctive change for the better, okay? And the way that you want to understand stylescapes, it's the bridge between design thinking and visual design. The bridge between design thinking, the strategic, the discovery, the facilitation, and the actual making of things. It's right in between those two. You don't have to be a graphic designer to make amazing stylescapes. You do have to have design sensibility and aesthetic point of view, but that's the really cool part. And if you're on the strategic side, this is a great tool. And if you're on the design side, this is also going to get you to inch towards understanding some of the bigger challenges facing the customer or the client, okay? So here's one of the biggest problems is when you go from something familiar to something new, there's a lot of anxiety. The process is not transparent, it's opaque, and there's a lot of guessing that's going on. And this is very problematic. And what do I mean by this? If you have to do a rebrand or a new website or a new logo, there's the familiar, what the client started with. There's what you know, which is what's familiar. And then you need to go to some new place. And this is very stress invoking. And this is something that we want to try to minimize. Okay. And the reason why is because when we go and present something new, we're not quite sure if the clients are going to like it or not. They could come back with two very different reactions. They could say, I love it, or I hate it. And this is where some of the stress comes in. Some of us live for the big reveal, but to quote my friend and author Blair Enns, stars do not audition. When you're a celebrity, when you're a superstar, you do not audition for the part. So what we must do is give up our addiction to the presentation and the big reveal. So this is a great tool to help you do this. This is somewhere between the giant presentation and not doing anything at all. So there must be a better way. There must be a better way to go from something you're familiar with to go something that's new. And what we want to be able to do is to reduce the amount of friction it takes from go from point A to point B. And Stylescapes are a great tool to gain perpetual alignment between all the stakeholders. That's a fancy way of saying everybody is on the same page the entire time. And so instead of having hard stops, it's a very graduated process. And it's like what we say on the show quite often, you're going to scaffold towards the solution together with the client. Okay, so let me take a step back. Maybe this is too fancy for you guys. It's kind of early in the morning for some of us anyways. So there's the old way. And this may be the creative formula in which you do client work, okay? Where a client reaches out in panic, usually via email, saying, hey, we have a project. We need to talk to you. They may call you or text you, whatever. There's this manufactured sometimes urgency behind the project and the deadline. So as soon as you get on the phone with them, what happens is they do the brain dump. They try to tell you as much as possible in as little time as possible. And that's very challenging because you don't know how to sort all this stuff out. You don't know what's important. You don't know what to do. So then the client, you might send them a questionnaire and then you get unclear and abstract answers as to what they want to do. Sometimes they throw in jargon or terms they just heard that day or that morning. But without that clarity, you start anyways. And you go into research phase to get inspiration, if you will, and you start to sketch and create tight designs, right? This is a process that should be very familiar to all of you. And then you present it. And what happens here sometimes clients are not the evil people we make them out to be. They're just not sure how to give you feedback. So they gave you vague direction because they don't have the language to articulate to you what they want. And you accept that language as being gospel. So you go and make more revisions, you do more designs and get more vague direction. And ultimately, somewhere along the way, the heat starts to build up. This is where that friction comes in. And the client says, you know, I need to tell you what to do. So they go on the internet, they start to look for things that they like. And they start to send you samples and things that they are inspired by in the middle of the night. And what does that do for you? That's killing you right now. And what you do is you do this over and over and over again. And this is the dark night of the soul when you start to bleed out of your eyes and you just want to give up at this point. We've all been there. I've been there. And at some point you just think to yourself, I just want to get this done with. I don't care how much money I'm losing. And if my professional reputation could be saved, I would pay to get out of this, but you can't. So you have something that doesn't make money and isn't work that you're proud or inspired to show. That's horrible. So we look at it on a graph, we can see that the more revisions you make, the less happy you are, the less profitable you become until you get to that point in the dark night of the soul and you crawl into the fetal position and say, I want my mommy. So where did it all go wrong? Well, it went wrong here. And this is from Simon Sinek's talk, Start With Why, that we have this gut feeling. This is the limbic brain, and the limbic brain doesn't have words to translate how we feel. When it reaches the neocortex, this is kind of all the data of the cognition, the perception, that's where we know. And that transmission between the limbic and the neocortex is where everything falls apart. This is where we say, you don't understand what I'm saying, or there was a miscommunication. So what we need to do is to translate those feelings into words and those words into images as quickly as possible so that we can gain agreement. Once we do that, Everybody's in love with the process. And that's what we're here to do today. Okay. So here's a quote from Socrates. The secret of change is to focus all of your energy, not on fighting the old, but on building the new. So what's the new preferred way? I'm going to show you my formula and talk you through this process. Okay. So they have the gut feeling. You're going to translate into words, which we're going to do together. And then you're going to prioritize. Like if we could only pick 3 words, what 3 words best define who we are? Now, this is where Stylescapes come in. When we have those 3 words, words can still be abstract. It could have very different meanings to the client and you, and this is where it'll fall apart. So what we want to do is we want to commit those words into images to make sure we're all on the same page. And once we get agreement, then we could build our prototypes and we can move really fast. Now, if you've ever designed something, when you have great clarity on the objective and the aesthetic, you can fly. You can go as quick as a flash. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about the ideas of like working at the speed of thought, because you're not second guessing yourself. You're not wondering, will the client like this? Am I going down the right direction? Or am I just fooling myself? Am I making something only to have my heart broken later? And then you can go into the refinement phase. And then now the refinement is where you can utilize all those amazing skills that you have, and you can go really deep. You can sit there and kern those letters to your heart's content. You could pixel F it, if you will, and knowing very well with great confidence that it's all been approved already. And then you deliver. The result, let's look at it on the graph again. The result is quite different now on that happiness profit margin, right? There's that honeymoon phase, and there's a little bit of work trying to figure out the right images, but it's exciting work and you can get behind it. And when you show them the Stylescape, if you do it correctly, which we'll talk about, they get excited about the future. They start to imagine things years into the future. And this is where we get the positive kind of scope creep, where they want to increase the budget to do more with you. And that's when it's amazing. Okay, let's keep moving on here. Ben, am I talking too fast? Sometimes Matthew says I talk too fast.
I don't think so, but I do want to ask the group if you guys want him to slow down. Let me know in the chat.
Yeah, let's do that because I can't see anything at this
point. So let's see. JD says speed is good. Nope, all good, all good, all good. Perfect pace. It's great. Good for me. Let's go with an exclamation.
Go, rock and roller.
Okay. Oh, woo!
So Ben, feel free to interrupt, ask questions on behalf of the group, my panelists. You also have permission to interrupt and just talk to me, okay? All right.
Yeah, so panelists, just logistics, go ahead and unmute and then start talking, and then I will allow your video to be shown.
Yes, and if you have a lot of background noise, please unmute and then mute when you're done, because it's very distracting for me. I lose focus easily that way. Okay. Now, once you present this way, I promise you, you will never want to go back. It'll be impossible for you to go back because you'll have made more money, you're happier, and you're exploring new ideas and aesthetics and things that you've always wanted to try, but weren't able to before. So I want to do a little thought experiment with you guys. I want to help you guys understand what this is like, right? So we're going to talk about the desired future state. So we're going to do a little mind walking. We want to use our mind to walk around and inhabit other things, okay? As the sirens are going by me here. Can you hear that, Ben? No, okay. Imagine yourself somewhere amazing, exactly 1 year from now. I want everybody to do this right now, okay? I want you to set everything aside. We're not taking any notes right now. If you have to, close your eyes. I want you to imagine yourself somewhere amazing 1 year from now. You've hit all your goals for the year. You're going to treat yourself to something amazing. I want you to imagine the place and space that you're in. What are you doing? What are you wearing? What do you see around you? Are you somewhere in a deserted island? Are you in the middle of all the hustle and bustle in a high-rise building overlooking the city through the glass window? Is somebody about to serve you your favorite beverage? Is your feet in the sand? Is it in the water? Where are you right now? What are you doing? Why are you so happy? What are you saying? What are you thinking about? Hopefully not work. What are you feeling? What time of day is it? So I want you to savor that moment. This is like when they say, you know, you want to have a vision board to kind of think about a desired future state, like where you're going to be a year from now. Maybe you're sitting there with us. Maybe we're in Fiji together at a very private conference to celebrate our business wins for the first of its kind. And it's amazing. There's great like Hawaiian music in the background. We're right it's right before dinner time and there's a feast that's been prepared for us. Now, how do you feel? Savor that moment. When we talk about goal setting, we need to be very clear about where we want to be. And the clearer it is in your mind, what it is that you're doing, who you're with, how you got there, the more likely it is that you will achieve those things. Now, what if I told you you don't have to wait, that you can go there right now? If we can just take a shortcut, whatever it is that you were doing. So Ben, did you do this mental exercise with me? Or were you just like monitoring the comments? Can you share?
I'm a robot, man. I'm a robot. Maybe one of the panelists did, though.
Yes, maybe one of the panelists did, and we can hear from them. So let's just take a moment. I just want to hear from you just for 1 second. 1 year into the future, you hit all your goals. You're super happy. What are you doing? How did this come to be? And just give me 20 seconds of what you're thinking and feeling.
So while one of the panelists unmutes,
Yes.
Andrew, William, Kyle, Mina, Inky Noel says that she's still in the ocean, or he is still in the ocean.
Wow, that's awesome. I'm not a water guy myself, so I don't usually think about the ocean unless I'm fishing, but not my body in the water. I'm scared of water.
All right. Yes, Suchet.
Yeah. Suchet, hey, bring yourself online. What you got?
All right.
Where are you? What are you doing? Paint a picture for me in 20 seconds. Tell me a little bit of a story. I'm leaning in.
I'm in the UK. I am finished with my photography course. I've got my diploma.
Nice.
I am on my way to becoming a professional graphic designer, web designer, and a photographer. And I'm about to go back to school after taking a year off and pursuing a business in graphic design.
Okay, so tell me a little bit more about the sights and the sounds. I think that was very goal-oriented, which is fantastic. Where are you in the UK? Let's zoom in. I want the details. Like, imagine you're describing it to a cinematographer or photographer, and what does it look like? What time of day? Where are you? Who are you with?
I'm in central London. I'm actually in Camden. And I'm essentially going to be going around and hopefully have some professional models this time around.
Okay, nice.
With
for a fashion shoot? What kind of model will we do?
Yeah, fashion shoot.
For what brand?
High fashion portraiture, Nikon.
Okay, love it.
And
okay,
hopefully I'm there with a partner.
Awesome.
A romantic partner. Yeah.
Nice. And so you're like trying to capture that golden hour light probably. There's a little crew with you. There's 2 or 3
Exactly. That 5:30 p.m. light. Someone's holding the reflectors for me and observing me. Yeah.
Love it. And as you're taking pictures of the clients behind you, just in awe of your mastery of lighting and camera work, right? And working
Absolutely.
with talent. Okay.
Yeah.
You feel that? How does that make you feel inside?
Ecstatic.
Okay. I'm happy for you right now, just thinking about it. Okay. So hopefully each and every single one of you guys, thank you very much. Each and every one of you guys have done the exercise and think about the feeling. Now, what happens is when you make a stylescape, that's the feeling that you're going to create for your client. So this is the bridge here. We're going to arc away from this mind-walking desired future state, right? So when you show your clients a stylescape, they start to imagine the future of their brand, their website. All their problems start to melt away and they see the possibilities. And that's what's really exciting about it. Now, average people make stylescapes and they just serve a function. Like this is what the colors are going to be. But amazing stylescapes, future powered stylescapes, capture the emotion, the feeling, and that's what you want to do. So here's a stylescape that we created. One of the earliest ones that I made for an actual client. It's for a commercial developer, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And here are the things that came from the stylescape. And so they started to get really excited because they saw all the possibilities from it, right? And so what we're doing is we're being very intentional in the images that we use, the graphics that we include to paint a picture of the future. And the clearer that you can do that, the higher fidelity that you can do that, the more likely that you're going to get buy-in from the client and they're going to sign off on it all. Or they'll say, you know what, that part bugs me. Let's fix that. And it's very easy for you to fix because for the most part, the stylescape is made up of images that you curate from the internet, not things that you actually design. You design the composition, you figure out what fits and what doesn't fit, you color correct things, you cut things out, and you're able to do this. Now, this stylescape was so amazing with my client because not only did we get to do this, we got to do so many other projects with them, including construction wraps, of course, the website, a brochure, and I even got to the image on the right here that you're seeing, design their showroom. Can you believe that? How is that possible? Why would they invite a graphic designer to tell their interior design architectural firm, follow what Chris is doing? So I got to do the best part of architecture and interior design, which is I just get to pull references together, design it, lay it out, render out images, but then somebody has to follow through and spec everything and actually oversee the construction, which I don't have a ton of interest in doing. So this is how we turned a $100,000 design assignment into a 1 million plus client. We went from an assignment to a client and became their agency. Okay. I'm gonna get more into this. Let's talk about the steps. Step number 1, we got to do some brand attributes. Okay. Now, when you guys, some of you do strategy, some of you guys have purchased our course called Core, which an update is coming in the next couple of months. Excuse me. It can take a really long time. It can take, for us, it takes sometimes 2 days, sometimes more. You have to build user personas, brand attributes, goals, prioritization. You might map out the conversion funnel before you can get to the design part. Well, what I want to focus on today is the brand attributes and how they can inform the stylescape. So you can get a really quick win and you can move really quick. Okay. So what you have to do is start off with brand attributes. And I'm just going to give you the prompt. The prompt is something like this. Describe the brand in a desired future state, not today, where you'd like to take it in a year or two, in terms of the voice, tone, look, and feel. The voice and tone describe how we're going to speak to other people. Are we inclusive? Is it warm? Is it lighthearted? Is it charming? And then we get into words like the look and feel. Now, these words, generally speaking, need to be somewhat visual. So if you come up with a word that you can't imagine a visual, try to find another word. This is where thesaurus comes in pretty handy. Okay? So you let them ideate and you work with them. You're like, oh, I like that word. And you can use this in a design sprint fashion where you're using a lot of Post-it notes where you say, we're going to spend the next 5 minutes, everybody, under these 4 prompts, voice, tone, look, and feel, write as many words that you think captures the sentiment of our desired future state of a brand. Write that down. This could be used for a music video. This could be used for doing a keynote deck. Write all those words down. And then what we need to do together is to say, well, what 3 words really capture the essence of who we are? If we could only pick 3, and we need to do that. Now, if you do it the design sprint way, you can give everybody little red dots to vote, and they can put all the dots on one or spread them across, and the ones with the most red dots wins. Or you can kind of just take the tone or pulse of the room and just say, do we feel like this word? Yeah. Okay. Wow. Okay. We're feeling this one. You guys just, all right. We're feeling, are these 3 words the best words to capture us? Now, once you're able to do that, we can begin the stylescape process. So I just gave you a collection of words there that I just wrote. These actually came from a deck that we did for a client, maybe a couple different ones, but rustic, authentic, industrial, vibrant, trendy, and comforting, historic, refined, and glamorous. So these are words that we would come up with the client. And you can do this by yourself too. Let's just say you're not really at that stage where you can have some kind of discussion with them. That's quite okay too. Because even if you're close, like a hand grenade, you'll win. You just got to be close, okay? So then what we can do now, stage 2, is to create image buckets. Now that you have your 3 words, let's just say it's, I don't know, whatever, pick one of these 3, historic, refined, or glamorous, or something like that. What we want to do is generate image buckets. And what I mean by this is you're going to collect a bunch of images by scouring the internet and putting them into folders. Okay? You have these themes now. What looks historic to you relative to the project? What looks like refinement? And what is glamorous, relative and contextually appropriate for this thing? And just start to find things, okay? So here are some resources that work really well.
Before we get into that, Chris, I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
So somebody asked, you have multiple categories of words that you're pulling from. Do you pull 3 from each category, or do you pull 3 total?
3 total. You must commit to 3. You've got to commit to 3, okay? Because otherwise you can see this will go on forever. Because even in historic, you can find architecture, interior design, you can find graphic examples, you can find a color palette that feels historic. You can find typefaces that feel historic. So we're just picking 3 total, whatever ones that resonate the most. Now, if you do multiple stylescapes, you can pick different groups of 3, but they're always 3. 3 seems to me to paint the clearest picture of how to move forward. Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, and also, guys, forcing the client to look through such a narrow lens is a really good exercise in getting good feedback right from the start.
Yes. If you're really into the Mad Men kind of thing, then they would say you have to just pick one word. We have to be one thing. What would that be? But 3 seems to be a workable amount for us. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
Cool. So you mentioned like creating folders for the image buckets. So would you say like we divide the folders according to the 3 words, or would you say like split them up into like color palettes and mockups, et cetera, et cetera?
That depends. Okay. So that's a very good question. That depends on your working style. So when I'm working with a team, so I have a team who does all this stuff, right? Like I don't do the stuff anymore. I direct them. So I have multiple designers working. I'll say, look, I only want you to focus on one of these words. Like say historic. Let me get back to that. I want you to work on historic. I want you to do refined. I want you to do glamorous as it relates to this project. And they'll just go in, they'll scour. So they might have a folder full of like 100 images. They'll open up all in preview and they'll just rapidly go through them with me. I'm like, I love that. Oh my God, that's amazing. And then can you guys organize around this? Sometimes they have to be redirected and they'll go out and grab even more images. Now that's the way I work because I'm art directing them. But if it's you who's doing it, you can do it any which way you want. But what I would do is just don't think too much. Just you see something, you like it, you put it in the bucket. Just keep putting it in. After the fact that you're going to organize, I'm going to show you how I organize these things and how it starts to make sense. Okay. So we typically go through this double funnel system where we go wide and we narrow it down and we go wide and we narrow it down. And once we're down to that second narrowing down process, it becomes really clear. You're going to see what I mean. Is that okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so let's talk about these resources, okay? Now, I like to use Pinterest a lot, and you can lose your life to Pinterest, so be careful there. It's like Inception, where you forget that you're inside the dream. And you could spend hours. I've like woken up at my desktop at 3 in the morning, like, oh my God, I'm still on Pinterest. Okay, I need a totem to remind me. Okay, Behance is also another great place. Now, what you want to do is follow the designers that you like. In logo design, in packaging, in wayfinding, in interior design, whatever you can find, illustrations, start to pay attention to those people. And you can start the Pinterest thing like yesterday, which many of you guys have, right? I'm not on Dribbble, but a lot of people love Dribbble. It's for designers, I think. So be on Dribbble. You can use Shutterstock. Unsplash is free. Creative Market costs money. Death to the stock photo. Pexels, I think, has a lot of free images or Creative Commons license. Gratisography is a photographer who gives his images out for free. And a bunch of these are free. Stock, Snap, SplitShare, Life of Pix. Those are all great resources for you guys to find images. Now, those are more photos. And the design stuff is going to live, I think, more on Pinterest, Behance, and Dribbble. Those are your 3 main sources to grab images, okay? Now, what you want to do, if it doesn't really matter the words, but I just put those 3 words up here: rustic, authentic, and industrial. What you want to do is you want to search for people, environments, packaging, lettering examples, colors, textures, patterns. I already said patterns. No. Architecture, interiors, typography, illustrations, photography. Even the color grading would form the ultimate design. Objects, an identity system, wayfinding, fabric, symbols, lifestyle, like people doing things that look like who your customers are, furniture and icons. These things will help you build a much richer palette. Think about it like those cooking shows where they have the design challenge. They have to run into the pantry and grab whatever ingredients, and then they can never go back in there again. So start filling up those image buckets, right? So each one of these things can send you down a pretty deep rabbit hole. Now, you're probably thinking, how long should I spend on this, Chris? Well, in the beginning, you'll spend a lot of time on this kind of stuff because you're still new to the process. But over time, here's the cool part. You'll develop image buckets and you'll kind of know where to go, what to find, what to look for. You start to develop a sense of what's going to work. So one of my favorite places to go, of course, is Pinterest. So this is my own Pinterest board here. And I've called it Interiors Rustic Industrial. And you'll notice that it, from afar, is pretty consistent. There's still raw materials like brick and concrete, exposed surfaces, wood. And that's one of my favorite boards that I have. And I can pull from this to help me put in the place of where one particular project will go. So when we're talking about authentic, industrial, historic, this is where I'm going to go to my board and I'll pull things out. Notice it's just not all graphics. Okay. So then I'm going to organize images into these buckets. Now, this is a graphic representation of what your folders might look like. Don't worry about resolution. Don't worry about fidelity and all that kind of stuff. Don't worry about it. So in the lifestyle thing, I'm like, okay, this is what it looks like. This is what a rustic lifestyle might look like. Trees, mountains. Look at the color palette, the way it's color corrected. Now, sometimes you'll find images that are the wrong color. Well, this is where you use Photoshop and you go and color correct it back into this world because you don't want anything to pop out. But not at this stage. My interiors bucket might look like this. So I'm transporting myself to that space and place where I had you do, but now I'm going to map it out visually. And maybe I find things that are interesting in terms of signage, wayfinding. So I like the way that the number 39 is painted on that building. So seeing really large scale type, that's kind of inspiring. Or this dimensional 5 that looks like it could be Dido, extruded in 3D space made of blackened steel. This weathered sign for Morgan's second floor. There's something really cool about a script typeface against a serif typeface and a sans serif typeface, even in the back, the Morgan sign. Or this chipboard thing with a white. So this rough with refined graphics and design on top feel really interesting to me. And even the way that the numbers are cut out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on the right with some color on it. Industrial with a little bit of refinement. That's pretty cool. So what you want to do is you want to build up these buckets, right? And it should be really fun for you to do because it's exciting. It's like you're going window shopping. It costs you nothing. And you can spend time just informing and in broadening your palette. Now, remember, what you're doing here is not about you. It's about what we need to do for the customer or the customer's customer. Okay. Now, there's this thing called the empathy map or empathy graph. And it looks something like this. Okay. And we're trying to understand what it looks like in this person's world because the clients hired you not for you to tell them what you think. They didn't even hire you to tell them what they think. They hired you to tell them what their customers think. So we need to kind of understand their world. So the empathy map looks something like this. What does this person think, feel, and believe? What are they hearing? What are they seeing? What are they saying and doing? And below that, we're not going to get into this, but this is the complete empathy map, which is around tasks that they have to do. What are pains and gains? How do they win? How do they lose? So when we understand that, we should be able to pretty clearly identify who this person is and know them well enough to pick them out from a crowd. So I got this on one of those free stock images, and I just love this guy's expression. I like his glasses, his suit, how it's patterned, his watch. There's everything about him that I think communicates a lot to me about who this person is. He's just not a model standing there looking good. So we ask ourselves these kinds of questions like, where do they live? What do they do inside and outside of work? What do they drink and eat? So if you create your image buckets and you assemble them, this could look like what an empathy map might look like in a visual sense. So this person, the profile was, she's in Chicago. She's a marketing person working at an agency, media agency, and she likes the outdoors. So she's always trying to find that balance between work, staying healthy, and not defining her entire existence around work. So those bottles of green drinks and juices, the clothing, the activity. So you can get a sense now who this person is, right? We want to be able to pick them out from a crowd. What places and spaces do they visit? What do they see, hear, and touch? So then this person, for one of our projects, was in Seattle, part of Pioneer Square. So we kind of transport ourselves, our mind, not our body, but our mind there. So we walk around. What do we see? So we see this kind of like very lightly mint colored building with a very cool gray trim around the windows. We see serif typefaces, and we see people inside, raw materials and maybe even some Edison bulbs. We see these kinds of graphic systems. We're by the water, so there's a certain vibe to it. Look at the color palette. So it's like we're curating things, and it's starting to inform what it is that we're going to do. So we're still in the double funnel process, guys. So we're still exploring and organizing. We're not yet quite committing to anything, which is the lovely part of this. And this you do on your own. This is not in front of the client. Where do they shop and relax? What things do they crave? Ben, you want to say something?
Yeah, a couple questions came in about this process. So when you create these image buckets, are you looking for buckets that are related to the actual prompt that you kind of keep and can reuse later? So if you're looking for rustic images, can you reuse these rustic images later for that same prompt?
1000%. We generally don't do it that way. And I'll tell you why, because over time, you'll be using the same images over and over. Now, of course, if you already scoured the internet for the best images, then yeah, you want to be organized about it. But here's what I'm going to caution you to do. When you do this at first, don't try to be too efficient about it. Just do it and enjoy it and love the process and understand it. When you're doing your 10th, 15th, 200th stylescape, maybe at that point you're like, you know what, let me keep these images organized. And I love the process of discovering and finding new things. New things are made all the time. So we want to keep it fresh. Okay. But yeah, for sure. Like if I'm looking for a very specific image that I've used before, I'll definitely want to go back to that folder and find it and put it there. So you can probably create a master directory around those kinds of ideas.
So Kevin asks kind of a logistical question.
Yeah.
Where do these files live? Are they on Pinterest? Are they folders in your computer? How do you do it?
Oh, you got to download these things. So when you find them, at first I'll go crazy. I'll start pinning things. I'll add them to my board because then I get a twofer. I get to build my Pinterest mood boards for reference later. And then I can go back and then I can download those images.
Awesome. So that first question came from Jasmine. So thank you for that, Jasmine. And then one more question. A bunch of people have been asking this. What about copyright?
I'm not an attorney, but this is an internal process for you to understand what it is that you're doing. You're not selling these images, nor will you finish the design using any elements from this. It's no different than your current process today.
Okay, that kind of concludes my questions. If any of the panelists have a question about this stuff so
Can
far.
I follow up on that?
Yeah.
Feel free.
So like you said, I think on your previous live stream, you mentioned that you obviously take payment for even the designing of stylescapes, right?
Yeah, we have to pay people to make stylescapes, yes.
Right. So wouldn't that technically be using those images in a commercial manner?
Like I said, I'm not an attorney, but I have spoken to an attorney about this, and this is a very common practice. And I'll tell you where this is, okay? If you're an interior designer, if you ever watched an interior design show, you know what they do? They create mood boards. They pull fabrics, textures, materials. They spec furniture. They are basically doing exactly what we're talking about, and they do get paid for this. And it would be insane for them to design somebody's home without creating these very extensive mood boards. And their mood boards go pretty deep. We're talking about 4 foot by 8 foot foam boards that they mount things to, and they present multiple versions of this, and they walk around and talk about things. They pin, they move things around. Fashion designers do the same thing. They go out and source. I met these two women who flew to Los Angeles from Italy, I believe, to source things. So they came back home with 2 full suitcases so they can lay it out and talk about it. So those 2 women were also paid to go shop professionally to bring back ideas to inform what is and isn't on trend.
Right. Because, I mean, I'm guessing that as long as the images are not, they're not supposed to be accessed for free, you should be fine because you're technically getting paid for the compilation as opposed to the actual images themselves, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the second question was.
No, it wasn't a question. I was just clarifying.
Well, you added the right, so I wasn't sure, like, what are we writing about? And I'm sure if you guys work in motion graphics, when we do pitch books, it is almost entirely built up of images that we didn't make.
Exactly. Right. So it's like we're getting paid for the compilation as opposed to the actual, the images themselves.
I think you were asking for a legal answer. And
no, I get it. You're not an attorney.
Like, I'm not an attorney, so I don't want to tell you something that you're like, well, Chris said, with his degree in law, he said, and therefore I can. What I do want to tell you is this, is that when you go to finish your design work, you want to make sure none of these images exist inside the finished product unless it was purchased or you have a Creative Commons license to use it. Right. So Unsplash is okay. That's why I mentioned Creative Market. Sometimes I'll go in there and buy certain things and include it. But this is a very low commitment way of establishing what it is that we're going to do. And you tell me any designer that you know that is alive that has not looked at a piece of reference and gotten paid for it, then we'll move on from that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So where do they shop and relax? What things do they crave? So again, I'm just trying to get into the mind of this person, right? So I'm seeing certain things. Now, I love this illustration of an octopus. It feels really nautical, but it's got a really cool style to it. Just love the pattern. And I'm just thinking this person that's in this area in Seattle and in Pioneer Square, all the materials have a certain vibe, black, silver, wood, crafty kind of vibe to it. And old school, like these old photographs from like a Sears Roebuck catalog for the Merchant Mills. And this iconography with the anchor, but it's kind of modern, so it kind of feels kind of cool. And these tags with twine punch hole or holes punched through them. And there's something about this car that I love. It just seems like it's dip dyed. This Tide one that's just this really deep indigo blue. And the topography, and even somebody painting over a map or a book or something to create this image of the pelican. The graphic power of these bottles, like this dude standing on the street is like, yep, I'm trying to get into it. And these potato chips using nautical flags as graphic motifs. Okay. Now we got the empathy map. I'm starting to get a feel for who this person is. I've gone through the process of building massive image buckets. Okay. Now I'm going to get into color and type. Okay, so there's some resources, and color is one of those hard things. It's very abstract. And I remember back from my early days at art school, someone's like, doesn't red mean love and passion? And the teacher turned to us like, red doesn't mean anything. It's your context on how you use it that gives it the meaning. So I'm a little kind of up in the air on this kind of stuff, because he turned around and was like, isn't red associated with blood and the devil? Oh, or apples and cherries? Oh, well, it's all about context then. But here's something I found in an article by Bob Cruz for Prototyper. He said 90% of a consumer's assessment of a company or brand is made by color alone. 90%. And I think of my own life. When I go to a gallery and I look at a painting, I'm mostly drawn in because the colors are so appealing to me. Their use of color. So I have a couple of images here. These were from Shutterstock, which we purchased. And so you got kind of think, wow, there's kind of that pink salmon color, and then the orange and the black and white kind of graphic blocking and the dot pattern. That feels really good. And this has a different feeling with this really vibrant red against this cooler blue, or this one, which I think is all CG, but looks like porcelain hands lit with a very cool light against a mauve kind of background, or this strawberry dipped in white. So there's a vibe here. You can see like how color without even design can say something. What's really cool is if you find an image that you like, you can feed it to one of these resources I'm going to share with you, and it could create a color palette for you. So you don't even need to be crippled by, I don't know what colors work well together. People ask us a lot about color harmonies, color theories. It's a little bit too much, right? But you can go to this website called colormatters.com, and they have an article on the meaning of colors according to them. Again, take it with a grain of salt, but at least then you understand a little bit of how most people associate psychology with color. And they even have color forecasting, which, you know, one of the most famous ones is Pantone. Pantone's color of the year, which is this very salmon color. How they arrive at that, I have no idea. How many people follow it, I have no idea. But there you go. One of the best resources for me is color.adobe.com, which used to be spelled with K-U-L-E-R, color, but it's spelled normal now, I think, right? So here's what you do is you go in and you click on the Explore tab, which is the middle tab, right? From Create to Explore. And then you can just type in a search string like this. If you type in fun and vibrant, this is what people have tagged as fun and vibrant. all the colors look vibrant. They do look fun to me. And you can export each one of these things into your program and use them. But you could easily screen capture and eyedrop it, and it'll work just fine. Okay. What's cool is you can step in a little bit closer, and you can see if there's additional information or comment, when it was created, how many times it's been viewed. So you can see, like, this is a very popular color palette, and popular probably for a reason. Another website is colorexplorer.com, where you feed an image and then it generates a palette. What is interesting to me is when this image was fed through 2 sites, it gave me 2 different results. So I don't know how they're doing this. So they're using different algorithms to calculate this. What's cool about this specific site is you can figure out with the drop down how many colors to extract from this image. So the more colors, obviously, the greater the fidelity. And you can then also move things around. I'm going to show you here. So you can import the colors. And then once you save that as part of your palette, you can adjust the red, the green, and the blue components, which is pretty cool. So you can start from that photograph. And by sliding these little sliders around left and right, it will generate different hues and shades. So you're like, oh, you can just dial in. So I pumped up the saturation, obviously, swung the hue a little bit to the right, and made it a little bit brighter. And then you can save that as your next palette. Pretty cool. Color Lovers, this must be UK, spelled like color, colorlovers.com. Also more palettes for you to look at. I thought some of these colors were just really beautiful. And what I liked about this one, and this is just the designer in me, once you search for results, I like how they display the colors in not even proportions. So they're not all just uniformly laid out. So there's more gray, more yellow, or more blue. It's kind of cool. I like seeing it like that. And just, if you're like me, also, you go to the paint store and you look at swatches all day. It's like, wow, there's something mesmerizing about color and color harmonies. Another one's Color Hunter. So Color Hunter is really, really, really simple. It doesn't have the same tools as the previous site that I talked about, Color Hunter. Send in this image, and this is what you get. So really no adjustment, really bare bones, gets the job done. I've even seen on Instagram now where they'll post like a really cool image on this one person's account, and they include the color chips underneath it in round circles. If you've seen that, I was like, oh, that's pretty interesting. They're trying to give you a little bit more information from that. So if you like it, these are the colors that they're pulling from it. Notice the blues don't really pop on this. I don't know why, or the purples. I think it sees it mostly as green. Okay, type. Okay, type. This is the list. You guys will probably get this recording, and when we go to record this thing for real, not just live like this, you'll have these resources and links and all that kind of stuff. But Typekit, Monotype, Font Shop, these are all really beautiful type boundaries, and there's some independent ones in there that the type aficionados will recognize. Hopefully I didn't repeat anything here. And you just pull things from the type. Now, there's a cool part about these type boundaries that the more sophisticated ones will allow you to try out a typeface first. So it's if you go to like Font, which is, I believe, changed to, what is it, Font Shop now. So when you type in Font, it just takes you to Font Shop. You can type in the word, the logo, and you can spec that typeface. And so here's a little quick hack that you can do, which is you screen capture it and you use it, or you auto trace it, and it's good enough for a Stylescape. So you don't have to actually buy the typeface first. You can just try it out. Just make sure you remember what typeface that is, so that if you wanted to, you can go back and you can buy it. Or you can also just use that and redraw it, okay? Now, you can't copyright a typeface, but you can copyright the code used to generate that typeface. So you redrawing it, there's no issue whatsoever. That was an episode, okay? Now somebody's gonna ask me a legal question, okay? And then what you wanna do is you wanna have some kind of type specimen. Now, when you get into this, you're gonna actually have to buy the typeface, but you wanna show not like A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You wanna have some words or some copy in there so we get a good feeling for it. And a great sentence to use is the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. I believe that has the entire alphabet in it, and that's why they use that. Okay, step 5. We're getting to the end of the funnel process, so we're going to be jumping in here, right? So what you need to do is you need to take all these images now. Now you're going to really judiciously curate. And what I mean by this is you have to assemble these images in a Stylescape and put it in there with great intention. So this is a rough format of what a stylescape looks like. It starts with a photo. There's some colors and typography. There's images everywhere. Sometimes a designer will show me something and I'll say, well, what of this image within the stylescape is it that you want me to look at? Oh, it's just this little corner. Well, you need to blow that up or you need to crop everything else out, because I want to be very clear later on when I'm designing, I can look back at this as a reference point and say, look, this feels off now because the stylescape did this and now you're doing that. So there's this balance between overproducing and underproducing, and we're going to get into a critique in a little bit. I'm going to show you what I'm talking about, okay? So that's kind of what it is. Now, here are the 3 prompts. Now, typically speaking, when the right project with the right budget comes along, we produce 3 stylescapes, exactly 3. And why do we do that? Because in those 3, the client is supposed to pick one predominant, and if they're not quite sure, they can pull something from another one, but they're not allowed to blend them together. And how do we do this? This I learned from Jose. So it's mild, medium, and spicy. Mild is what we would consider the most expected on-brand, on-brief direction. I don't mean mild like we hate it, just mild like that's exactly what we both talked about. And then spicy is where you're like, well, based on these 3 words, we took some creative liberties and we want to push you. It might be on the edges of what we would consider is on brief. We're not talking about going bananas. Like if the brand is elegant, we're not going to show a bunch of clowns in it. We're just going to find what the edge of elegant might be. It could be something like from McQueen, the designer, Alexander McQueen, where he pushes the edge between fashion, refinement, and elegance with art. Medium is just the one that's blended in between the 2. Now, if you're the one making the stylescapes, sometimes it's very difficult for you to do 3 different takes on it. And it must be 3 different takes for them to have any real value. Okay? You might then need to employ somebody else to say, I'm going to give you 3 words. I want you to go bananas. I want you to go as far towards the edges as possible. And then show me what you can come up with.
So Jesse Ellert just asked, could you do just one stylescape and focus all of your energy on that?
Yes, you can.
Instead of doing 3.
And we do that too. And we'll talk about that. Okay, so Ben, put a pin on that one and we'll circle back to this, okay?
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And there's presentation strategies too. Sometimes in the past, we've gone and presented mild first, but I think what you want to do is start with spicy. If we know anything about cognitive bias, this is a form of anchoring. You go with the craziest direction first, then you progressively step away from it. By the time they get to mild, like, oh, yeah, there we go.
Yeah. And honestly, I like showing them 3 because at that point, it's no longer a presentation, it's a collaboration. So now the client can get in there and actually say, you know what, I like this one better than this one. And you get more involvement from them versus throwing one up at this point.
Yeah. There's something else about the way human minds work in that we need context to understand. When you see a photo of somebody, they're like, well, that person's really tall. Not until you put them next to a really tall person, like, oh my God, they're not that tall at all. So sometimes what you would consider spicy or mild or whatever, next to something else, all of a sudden we just understand, like, wow, okay, you went pretty far on that one, but we just don't know. So maybe 2. But I'll talk about that later. I'll talk about theories, strategies, what works in the real world, and what you're signing up for. Another way of looking at how to do 3 different stylescapes, not just based on how far we push to the edge of the brief, but here's something I learned from Douglas Davis in his book, Creative Strategies, The Business of Design, is that he calls it the 3 R's, which I like a lot: rainbow, rhinoceros, and rhombus. You can never forget that. Rainbow, rhinoceros, and rhombus, because they're so different. These are non sequiturs. They have nothing to do with each other. The first one could be just really inspired by color. Let's just say you found an image that fits those 3 descriptions and it's really beautiful. Like for example, let me pull this up here. Where is it? Let's just say this. You're like, you know what? I'm just really inspired by the colors of this. I'm going to let this stylescape be driven by color, right? And you could just build a stylescape based on that. Now I'm going to have to find my way back. Okay. Rhinoceros is really built on the strengths of the brand. What makes them really unique? And you can try to make a stylescape built around that. So I'm giving you some different prompts to help trigger ideas. That's all that is. You don't need to describe it to the client this way. Because if you get stuck, you're like, what else am I going to do? Well, let me try the rhinoceros approach. And Rhombus, if they have a physical product or something that has a unique shape, maybe that's a jumping off point for you to build your stylescape. So rainbow color, rhinoceros built around the strengths, or rhombus the shape. Step 6, presentation. Okay, and we're going to get into the stylescape so you can see a bunch, but this is how I've laid it out for you to understand, okay? When you go to present, there's a couple of things. When you go to show the work, you want to adopt a helpful and optimistic tone. Like, everything's possible, and I literally say to them, anything can change. The term stylescape is not one that's part of the general lexicon or vernacular of ways of describing this thing. You could just say, look, I'm going to put some images in front of you that are highly curated to take your temperature to see if we're on the same page. And I have 1 or I have 3 to show you. And it was quickly done. I want to say that. So there's low commitment here. So I'm giving them permission to give feedback and for us to work on it together. And that's really what I want to do. I'm half presenting and half gauging what they're interested in, and also guiding them through the process so that we can determine the direction together. So here's a stylescape that we put together for the School of Motion. They've given me permission to share this even though it hasn't launched yet, right? So 3 words that describe their brand is flexible, premium, and clean. The School of Motion, right? So this is the stylescape that we came up with. And we presented it to them, and they had certain feedback from us. Now, the reason why you see all these color gradients is this. If you look at the 3 triangles, these 3 triangles here, you can see where they overlap. They create a 3rd color. We thought it's cool. What if we just blended those colors together? What if the red went to the yellow, and the yellow went to the green to the blue, and the blue to the violet? That would be pretty cool. So we want to just expand from that point. So we're really doing the rainbow approach here. The stylescape, even though we have those 3 words to work with, is really inspired by color, because that's what makes them unique. We could have taken the rhombus approach and really have a lot of sharp edge triangular things in the design, but we didn't do it that way. So then they gave us feedback.
Sorry, could I ask a question on that?
Yeah.
So this seems like, since these are all curated images, they seem to work really well with the colors that are on the School of Motion logo. What would you search for if you were trying to find things like this, like those business cards on the very left?
Yeah.
I guess what they are. They seem perfect for this. Were those
Don't they? Yeah. So what happens is this, that all this wonderful design work exists in the world. Once you narrow your lens, all of a sudden the things that you look for pops up, these gradients. So Min designed these stylescapes for me. And I said, Min, really, I just want you to focus on the colors and find some things and then do what you do. So there's a whole presentation deck that I think I'm going to share with you guys, where you actually get to see me present this to Joey from School of Motion. And you'll see some pushback. You'll see how I present. I'm not going to try to recreate that right now because it'll be inauthentic. But there's 2 things that really stuck out to me in terms of the School of Motion logo. We're not going to change the 3 pyramids. Everything else we're going to change. So those 3 shapes we like, the colors we like, the idea of them overlapping we like. Look at the 5 and how it overlaps.
Mm-hmm.
You see, so when we have that clarity, you'll be surprised in a very short amount of time. I think Min only spent a couple of days working on this, even less, because she was busy with other things, and just started putting this together. And then we're pretty deep into the design process right now in real time on this project, and you'll see how we go from this to the finished product. And it's pretty exciting.
Hey, Chris, can I jump in and ask a quick question?
Of course.
Is this one of the examples where you only did one style?
Yes. Okay. Man, you guys are sharp. You're really sharp, because I wasn't really interested in exploring 3 different things. Like, I know the brand, I know who they are. They were very clear as to what they wanted. And we didn't even do strategy or facilitation, none of that stuff, right? Well, we did a little bit of it. We really dialed in because they were like, you know what, we need to be consistent. We're all over the place and it's not as inspiring as I'd like it to be. And so we're going to just dial this in. And there are inherent risks with this because you might have to do multiple revisions on this, which is exactly the case. So we presented this, and I'll give you some of the feedback in a second, right? So the feedback looks like this. So the top one is the original one. The bottom one is the one where we netted out on, and it took 2 versions to get here. So you think if we had just done 3 in the first place, we might have been here just to begin with, instead of doing 2 revisions to get here, okay? One was Joey said, you know, that guy, the emo guy on top, he's a little too cool for our audience. Really, we're all like computer nerds, and that's too aspirational. It's like too cool for school kind of thing. And we really think that there's missing an element of whimsy, like it's almost too sophisticated for us, which is kind of a strange way to describe it. We need to bring back some of that fun. So in the discussion, we arrived at it needs illustrations. Well, what kind of illustrations? Well, this style of illustration was from Shutterstock, because we could not easily extract images from an existing illustrator. So we just wanted to find something that's kind of on trend, you know, small heads, small hands, big bodies, that kind of thing, long legs. And so you can see them sprinkled in there. And they're really not that drastically different. It was just about finding the right style and the tone, okay?
What were the words that we used for this project? What were the brand attributes and the prompts?
I have it right here. Flexible, premium, and clean. So you can see this is, even though I have those brand attributes, I decided to go with rhombus and rainbow to generate one stylescape. I'm really interested in the colors. I'm really interested in the shape, the overlapping shapes, but mostly the colors, because I think that's what makes them unique. So this one is not a ground up branding assignment. This is a rebrand or a brand refresh. So there's already a lot of things that exist that we can pull from. And that's why we did it this way. But I'll show you one where we did it where there's no existing brand. It's a brand new property, concept, and idea. Then what do? Well, you get to shape it, and it's pretty cool.
So,
okay.
Chris, before you jump,
yeah,
when you're working with a client who has all of this background, like storage of assets, and you're refreshing their brand or whatever it is, how do you facilitate the transfer of all of those assets? Right? They have photographs from the school, and they, you know, whatever.
How do I transfer the assets? You mean when we're done with the design?
No, I'm saying when what you just said was you already kind of understood the client, you understood what they were going for and sort of their motivation and where they wanted to go.
Yeah.
So that's why you only did one stylescape. And then they have all of this background of visual collateral that they've generated over the years.
Yes.
Do you have them sort of give you a link to some terabyte drive where you can access those images that you might reference in the stylescape, or you?
Oh, okay, this is very clear. This is a good question. I understand now. Joey's very organized because his team is mostly remote. So he has one Notion document that has a link to almost all the assets that they're using. It's not as gigantic as you think.
Okay.
Right. So they have, here's the logos, here's the email templates, here's whatever, a newsletter, a poster. So we know all the different kinds of parts and pieces that this brand is going to touch or the design. And we just need that for context. I'm not literally going in and redesigning every single thing. What I want to do is give him, in this case, a guideline, the design Bible, manual, and that's it.
Gotcha.
And as an added bonus, if we finish it in time, we'll just include it as part of this thing. It wasn't meant to be, because that's for something else. Okay, we'll just throw it in so you guys can see literally from the stylescape to the completed guideline. All right.
Cool.
Yeah, because we're not going to design the website. We're not making all this stuff. We're just helping him to figure out this brand. And his reaction to this has been fantastic so far. So it's been like, wow, this is exactly what I hoped it would be, but I didn't even know how to tell you how to do. And we're doing this in days. It's a design sprint, right? That's what we're doing. It's like, are we going to be happy with where we wind up before we get there? And we want lock-in and buy-in here early. Okay. So you see like there's this guy with a parka, center top, a little bit to the right with blue and red, and he's facing away from camera. So if they're going to do a photo shoot, I would encourage them to use really strong colored gels to light their teachers. So that's going to inform where they go. You see, so this is when the reason why I did that Mind Walk Desired Future State with you guys is this is what I'm doing for him, not in a mental exercise, but visually. Like, this is where we're going to be in a year. Can we get behind this? Can you see your newsletters, your posters, your thumbnails for your channel, all this stuff looking and feeling like this? Well, yeah, let's get excited about it. And at this stage in the game, if we wanted to do more service work, I'm pretty sure after we designed the guideline for him, he would come back and like, okay, you made it look a lot easier than I thought. Can you do the website? Can you do the newsletter? Can you do all these things for us? And then we would enter into an expanded project. Okay, example. So my panelists, good job. You don't have to say, can I ask? Just ask. That's what you're here for. Don't worry about interrupting me, okay?
Hey, Chris, we are at an hour mark. Are you good? You need to take a quick break or anything?
Do they need to take a quick break?
Guys in the chat, you need a break?
You guys want to take a 2-minute break?
Everybody says no, but I know that it's a lot to talk for this long. So if you need a...
Okay, thanks for asking. If you hear my voice breaking and cracking, then I will just call an audible and take a break. Right now, I'm in the flow. My son just got me some more warm water, so I'm good to go. All right.
All right.
So
Keep it
this
rolling.
is a project from the ground up for one of our clients for a property called 450 Alaskan, right? A lot of commercial real estate, they just take the address and make it the property. And sometimes we come up with a new name. This time we're just calling it 450 Alaskan, right? So it's a commercial real estate developer. This is in Seattle, Washington. I showed you some of the images. It's in historic Pioneer Square. So the way that we did this is we had 2 different teams kind of working concurrently because it was a lot of work for us to do. This is our 4th or 5th project with this particular client. So they're just, once we did the strategy and facilitation, we kind of told them about Pioneer Square. So some of my designers started to make logo explorations. And you would think Pioneer Square, historic, rustic, Seattle, the upper left, upper left USA kind of thing. So these are little marks that people created really fast, just generating ideas, right? About trees, nature. Even the typefaces reflect that kind of vibe. And oars, crisscrossing, the anchor, which I love, the one on the bottom, I just love that. And these things come from having built up the empathy map, because you start to look at the design aesthetic and then you could quickly design it. It's like, oh, is that kind of typeface? It's thin, it's got some curved parts and some line elements. And so you can learn and develop new aesthetics that are outside of what you normally do. Then we reduce it down to these 3. Now, we don't present logos by themselves, right? This is just what the internal team is working on. Then we presented these 3 stylescapes. And strategically in the past, we go on and off and depends on who's presenting. But sometimes I like to come up with a name. So you call it something like the Madonna. You can call it the cabin. And everybody's like, ooh, and you can just refer to it. So it's not stylescape 1. And so you can see here, what's essential to all this stuff is you see that gentleman that's checking his phone with the olive green, army green jacket on. So they're telling us, well, Seattle's not like LA, Chris. We don't dress, we're like a lot more casual. We're boots and jeans, even though they're millionaires and billionaires. It's a very different vibe. It's not that slick Hollywood. Okay, we just want to make sure. So you remember that number 39 typography example? See how it's like ghosting on top and there's buildings kind of coming in, and we'll overlay typography. And what's important for us is that it not feel like a bunch of grids. And I'll show you how to do that later. So we overlap elements. We'll use type and shapes to break up the blockiness of the grids. And if we were to zoom in, which I'm not going to do, every single one of these things has been thought through. You see on the bottom left, there's this old school kind of newspaper. We even swapped out that name and put Alaskan in there with the same typeface. Now, when we're doing like logo sketching, I don't believe it's the typeface we own. We typed it in on one of these types foundries, and we screen captured it and colored it and just dropped it in. because we're not quite sure, is this the direction we're going to go in? Now, when I talked about this graph earlier between going from blue to yellow, this is that perpetual alignment thing. We're going to ease them into the new from, in this case, nothing. So the old is nothing into this. So we know it takes a little time for everybody to get their heads wrapped around new things. And this is the power of Stylescapes. And this is the second one, which was really inspired by the map, the topology. Is it topology? With the lines, exploration, driving into the woods. And then now we have a different person, but also he feels like he could fit in this world. Now, theoretically, this is the executive who's going to be running a company, who's looking at Seattle in this particular location as a potential spot for his company. Highly curated, hand-stamped graphics. Look at that survival manual. So it fits in there, right? It feels like it all belongs.
As you're showing these, all of the hipsters in the audience are groaning. Like, oh.
Groaning or feeling it?
They're feeling it.
Feeling it. Okay, here's the last one, which is most definitely the spicy version. And if you've watched this episode, Ben Burns and I think we tried to present the Stylescape to each other. And you guys can watch that to see how we both look at it and present. Now you can see this guy, this older gentleman. He's got salt and pepper going on, but he's cool. He's got the scarf, the watch, and he's got a vibe to him. His lips are pursed together. So he's definitely edgier than the other two. And usually when you put the person in, it changes definitely the images, right? So it's by the water, and I love the ocean, not being in it, but I love the ocean. And I love container architecture. So you see the thing with the puma cat. So we're pulling that as a reference. And once I explained to them like what each of these images means to me and what they could do with it, painting that desired future state for them, they got really excited. It's like, can we do something with Chris? I'm like, well, that's up to you. If you want me to design a showroom for you using container architecture, you would make me a really happy person. So you can see like the possibilities excite them. They're energized. And then there's some nautical things like north, west, and coordinates, longitude, latitude lines, a very graphic blocking pattern in that tube and the brilliant blue and the red. And even the typeset for 450 Alaskan is really kind of wild in the way that it breaks, right? And the iconography that we're using. And then you see that there's a map that's drawn on the ceiling and the wall. So then they start thinking like, where else can we use that? Let's design a vinyl. Chris, can you design that? Yeah, okay, I can do that. This is what I mean. Everything in here has great intention. And there's a little story too between the 450 that's red and blue that's flipped backwards in the center left that I told them, like, I'm fascinated by sailboats, which I see in the water there. And sails are transparent. So 450 on one side is backwards on the other. And there's something really cool. And as soon as I said that, my client's like, oh, that's so amazing that you saw that. This is all from a bunch of curated images. Now, some of these things we have to go and color correct and dial in so it feels cohesive, because one blue to the other blue, they're not quite right. So our designers go in and color correct all these things. So even though you pull them off the internet, doesn't mean that they're ready to go. Some will have to be cleaned up and cloned out stuff, okay? Now, of these three, presumably mild, medium, and spicy, you would think there's no way they would go for this. And this is exactly the direction they wanted to go in. You see that? So all that logo exploration I showed you was for nothing, because they want this super modern aesthetic. Now, here's the bonus. I'm going to show you how we started to present some of this design to them, okay? As we're expanding. So a lot of what we try to do is to take a design system and show them what it looks like in the real world. This is not one of those slap logo things. And if you watch the episode with Sagi Haviv, a slap logo is you take the logo and you literally slap it on every single thing. That's not really telling the story. So the Stylescape is like pre-designing the rest of this stuff, because you know those lines on the map and this indigo color, this really brilliant blue, that's seeping its way into design. And believe it or not, they actually hired us to design the construction barricade And we use plywood and printing techniques just like this. But this was just a sketch. Container architecture. You see the sign that somebody comped in there, 450 Alaskan? That was not obviously part of the original thing. And dropping in the map lines, the depth map. And even though we might present like a really early mock, like this iPad, notice the mountain in the back from the lifestyle picture? That's the same one. And almost even designing a bag of coffee for them, just because it's so exciting, because we've spent so little time making ideas that don't work. We actually have time to make ideas that do work. Now, we have very talented designers, I'm not gonna lie to you. So you see here this 450 Alaskan table. It's black and steel. They made it blue. They put the little embossed logo treatment on there into the wood. And people get very excited about these kinds of things, as you can imagine. And we do this really, really fast. And none of this is the final design. This is just us exploring, okay? So this was an idea for like, oh, how might we do the floor plan? Well, maybe there's just like this old stamp vibe to it, and we kind of call out certain things with color. Somebody was going to say something?
Yeah, Chris, could you clarify, is this after they've chosen the
No.
Okay, this is before.
Yeah, this is before.
Thank you.
My designers go bananas. Once they do stylescape, they're like, what else do we do? I'm like, okay, go make some stuff. It's cool. We'll do it. Or we'll present the stylescape and like, they're like, oh, wow, we love this. And we'll continue to explore. So I'm not about doing things that say that there's a miracle silver bullet. You never have to do any work. But I'm saying for those people who really love to design and make things, there's a right way to use your energy. And then there's probably a less preferred way of using your energy. It's all narrowing things in. I'm going to show you another stylescape that we did. This time we did two. This is for a YouTube channel called Indie Mogul. They had a lot of assets, and we talked really briefly. What are we going to do? So Indie Mogul. So this is a channel, an education channel, to teach cinematographers, people who make video for a living, and how they can do it on a budget. So we made two. So this person, this guy, who looks to me like he's mixed ethnicity, feels like somebody who would be watching the channel, holding this long lens. Sometimes we can't find the perfect image, but this guy feels really good. There's a color palette, and we're trying out a typeface, right? Already, we're dropping things in. We're including graphic elements and ideas, right? So Indie Mogul, there was just like this vibe that it didn't want to be too slick. The idea of using VHS tapes, Sharpies, and grease markers to write, the feeling of impermanence, and these large swatches of color. And I also remembered when I saw the initial design, this was also, I think, put together by Min. I said, Min, this really, it's like the vibe, the color really reminds me of this collab between Guru and Kodak. Throw that skateboard in there just to bring some youthful, fun energy into it. Okay.
So in this stylescape, I see a lot more sort of dynamic difference in terms of like the elements that you're putting in are of very dynamic different sizes compared to the previous stylescapes, which were a bit more sort of even toned. Is there a reason for that?
No. I mean, what you may or may not think of like is even or uneven really is just us designing. And I'm going to show you the grid, and we'll do a little bit of it together, and I'll show you kind of how to do it, okay? Now, we are designers. My background is design and graphic design, and so is Min. So when we lay these things out, I almost feel like they could be works of art. Like we're the museum curator saying this piece of artwork goes to this and this goes to this. Now, you'll notice if you look at this, look at how much yellow we use. And we don't stack it all in one area. We don't concentrate on the left or the right. See, we sprinkle the colors around, and it ties everything together. You see this really bright green? That green can be obnoxious, so you have to use it very sparingly. And you will see in the left palette, you'll see it in that little bracket on the skateboard, on the letterhead, and the album cover, and a little bit on the far right of the VHS tapes and the stacks of film.
Mm-hmm.
So we're trying to do this thing where we bring it all together. And some stylescapes will be really dense and some will be more open and some will be more dynamic or some will be more organic. It's really about just feeling the vibe of what it is we're trying to do. And there's no hard and fast rule, just like any design. So here's the second one. Same person, slightly different vibe. And what's interesting here is the feedback from the client on this one was, I really love the film festival poster. I like these tags, like this person's traveling all over the world, like from Stockholm to wherever. And we like some of that barcode graphics, but we feel like it's too designed. We want it to be rougher and more hand done. And we like the pop of green. So this is also now done with this, what do you call it, the style guide and the usage system that Min designed, which is pretty fantastic. So really quickly, it's very narrow in terms of what we're looking for. Both are on brief, but they have a very different vibe and they feel different to the client, and that's what matters. I'll show you another set. And I hope that by showing you this, you start to recognize a pattern, like how we approach these things. And we have a very high standard in terms of like what we do with these stylescapes. Like I said, I'm not telling you anything you may not have heard before, but there's a big, in my opinion, a big difference between how some people do it and how we do it, and why we're so successful at doing branding for our clients. This is the linchpin. So this is for an architectural firm in Culver City. They're like near star architects, not famous like Frank Gehry, but they're pretty up there. And here we're trying to see if they'll like this idea of mixing sans serif with serif, and the textures and the grid system. And in this case, the buyer was the client is most often a woman, because they do a lot of schools and institutions, and the directors of these departments tend to be women. So here we're going to pop in somebody who reflects their client. A lot of natural materials, softer tones. Here's another one. Now you'll notice that we're using similar ideas with these dashes because my designers have a certain predisposition towards certain design aesthetics. So this is a different one. Now this one for an architectural firm needs to be cleaner. And you're going to see a lot more materials involved, from concrete to marble to reclaimed wood. And this is the last one. Much more modern, much more graphic. And this one is the one that wound up inspiring Where We Go. And there's this really weird company that, even though we know them really well, we still had to do a stylescape for them, The Future. So I'll show you what that looks like. I'm not going to talk about this that much. So we can go from black with a really small dose and hit of an intense blue to something that's a little bit more colorful, something that's more open with white. You can run the gamut. Now you can see, for us, we don't have that many needs. We kind of know exactly where we need to go with this. So it's a little bit more focused and easier for us to get into it. Okay, so here's the exercise. Here's the homework that you guys need to do. And then I'm going to give a critique and I'm going to do a little live demo for you guys, okay? I think we're doing okay on time. Excuse me. So here's what you need to do. What you want to do is identify your desired customer. I want you to do this for your design company. You're a solopreneur, you're a freelancer, whatever. I want you to think about who your desired customer is. I want you to build an empathy map. Who's this person? Man, woman, young, old? What are they doing? What's their life like inside and outside of work? I want you to generate an image bucket, okay? And what we need to do is we need to align our brand, our social media, our design aesthetic, so that we have the best shot of attracting this person in. Because people like people who are just like them. I want you to try 3 attributes. You can try to make one stylescape around the 3 attributes for the image bucket. You can curate them according to the rainbow, rhinoceros, or rhombus approach. You can make one stylescape. And everybody is doing this part of the assignment. I think there's an opportunity, if I'm not mistaken, Ben and I are going to pick a few to review. And if you're going to post it online somewhere, use the hashtag Future Stylescapes with an S. Also use the hashtag the future and mention me so that I can see it.
Yeah, and I will follow up with instructions on how to
Yeah.
do this, guys.
You won't have to memorize this, okay?
Sorry, I'm
So
just
here-
a bit confused as to like whether we. So the stylescape we're designing is for us or for the customer?
It's the
Like
same.
for our brand?
It's the same because your stylescape can't be for a different customer. You're sharing the language, right? So here's what we know. It's very difficult to get the customer to come to you, so you will go to the customer. In each one of these stylescapes, we imagined who the customer is. For example, let me go back to it. Where is it? We imagined what this young indie filmmaker looks like, what he or she is doing, the world that's familiar to them. So we designed a stylescape for them because our brand needs to appeal to them. It's what Seth Godin talks about is the smallest viable market, SVM, or SVA, smallest viable audience. You need to be able to pick them out from a crowd. So this person's probably urban, it's mobile. This is the world that they're familiar with. And we design around that because we want to appeal to them. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I just meant like, is our client, like, are we designing for the demographic of our clients?
One client, your
Yeah,
ideal
like-
client.
Oh, okay, cool, got it.
You're going to imagine your ideal client and you're going to build an empathy map for them. Like, remember all that stuff we did earlier? You're going to build an empathy map for them. And then you're going to curate the images so that this is a meeting of the minds between what you love to do and what they love to do is the sweet spot.
You know what's funny is that
What's that?
everybody in the audience who's terrified of specializing is now screaming. Panic ensues. Their brain is going crazy right now. That's right. You have to pick one client.
Smallest viable audience, you guys, SVA. The thing is, you guys are afraid to pick a lane, so you try to appeal to everyone. And when you try to appeal to everyone, you just become really boring. You become indistinguishable from everybody else. So then what do? You have to then compete on price. Do you want to compete on price? I don't think so. Not if you're watching this channel. All right, let's get into the checklist. I have a checklist for you guys, okay? And afterwards, Ben will supply you with whatever materials that you need. The checklist. So here's what you need. You need to have a photo that represents your customer type. Just one customer. What does he or she look like? Like I said, are they young, old, male, female? What ethnicity? Try to get a vibe. Are they doing something interesting, fun, and cool? You want to, this is just an exercise for you guys to understand how to build stylescapes. So I want to serve some utility versus just like let's do a random assignment. That if you're in the process of reconsidering your website and your social media marketing and how you present yourself to the world, this is actually a very useful exercise. In a way, you can think of it as a personal branding exercise, and you're going to make a stylescape out of it. You're going to figure out your color palette based on the attributes that you picked out. You're going to have your primary and secondary type specimen included. And there's a bunch of things that you want to find and include in your stylescape. And here's just a checklist: identity system, graphics, patterns and textures, materials, print collateral, contextually relevant applications, wayfinding, which is basically signage, photography, navigation, if you're thinking about a website, printing, finishing techniques like, oh, if you have a business card, will it have a hot foil stamp? Will it have a clear varnish? Will it be a blind emboss? Those kinds of things actually add to the conversation. Interface design elements, information graphics, exhibit design, interior and exterior design. Okay? Everybody clear with that? So that's what you're going to do. Before I give you this critique of stylescapes that were submitted before to kind of show you what to avoid, is there any questions so far? What are you going to do? Now, this is a course. This course is for you. So if your life is too busy, don't worry about it. That's what video is for. You can watch us and do it. But if you want to participate with us in somewhat real time, you're going to need to do it. And you're going to have to do it pretty quick because Ben's already had this scheduled for the next call, right, Ben?
Yeah, so the critique is going to be Friday. So you should not spend a lot of time on this.
You're
Now-
not supposed to anyway. It's supposed to be pretty fast.
That's right. So a couple of people asked, how long does this usually take?
If you're good, a day and a half. It could take you 4 days to do. It shouldn't take you 4 days, but it could. I remember when we taught some designers that were hotshot art center grads, they struggled with making Stylescape because you know what the first thing they said to me? Excuse me. They said, I've never had to make anything for anybody else before. That is the dilemma. They've never had to imagine what it's like to be somebody else.
Hey, Chris, I have a question. So I run a small industrial design agency, and so my whole kind of reasoning around this, my participation is to kind of think also in terms of branding for clients and how this relates to that, but also how I can use the Stylescape as that compass and setting that North Star for a project in a physical product. And
Yep.
so I wanted to know if you can kind of color it a little bit from that perspective.
Yep.
Thanks.
Okay, sure. I think when you're doing industrial design, you have issues about materials, about form, right? And what I've find really interesting about IDEO is they started out their life as an industrial design company, and then they started to realize they had to design everything because the entire user experience goes way beyond the thing that you make. So they started getting into packaging, customer experience, interface design, and now they're champions of design thinking. I think that's a term they coined, design thinking, or they were trying to own that term.
Yeah, it's true.
So I think when you think about the user, and you do this because I've seen industrial designers at Art Center when they present, like, this is the user, this is the day in their life, this is their world. So we're designing something for somebody. I think industrial designers are the forefathers actually of all this UX stuff that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
The design of everyday things. That's the principle of UX, and we just do it in a digital way. So think about that. Think about all the things that go into the considerations that you have before you actually make anything. Right? Whether it's like a product designed for older people, so there's issues about arthritis, handicap accessibility, about visibility, in terms of, or legibility, I should say. There's all those things. So I think that can paint a pretty rich picture. And then you'll have to tell me later, like, how it works, because it's very specific, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think in terms of this first one, my exercise is going to be probably focused around branding or rebranding my own agency, because I haven't spent hardly any time doing that. So to answer some of the questions from earlier, for me, I am the customer, and I typically design for other people. And so it's actually harder for me, as opposed to the Art Center guys, to never design for anyone else. I've barely ever designed for myself.
Well, there's a buyer of your services, and let's just say a year from now, that's more who you would like to work with, because we all have customers, right? So there are good customers, bad ones, and the ones in between. But on the edges of the good customers, like, how do we attract those people? What do we need to show them to let them know this is who I prefer above all else?
Right.
Let's think about those people, and let's design your Stylescape for them. And then you can go through the process of doing your new website.
Cool.
Okay, I'm going to jump in here. I'm going to show you the critique. Here are 3 Stylescapes, different Stylescapes, presented or submitted to me by my pro group that I coach. Here's the first one. Now, if it isn't immediately obvious, and I'm only talking about this for the sake of learning, as a learning opportunity, not to cast judgment on anybody, okay? So I picked the ones where I feel like I'd have a lot more to say. So you can see this person, and it's a very stock image. The person's pulling their chest apart like Superman, and it tells me a little bit about who this person is, and this is called for champion property management. And you can see that they do go through some of the components of what a Stylescape requires: typeface, color, and then a lot of people just shouting like with joy and fist pumped in the air and that kind of stuff. But if you had to make something visual from this, if you're trying to excite me about some desired future state, I'm not getting very excited about this. There's a lot of design that's missing from this. I feel like I have 1 or 2 notes in a symphony, but not enough to know what I'm buying into. So the mistake that you'll make is you'll present this and the clients are like, love it. What are you going to do with your designers? What are they going to make? And if you come back with anything, you might find out that it's not even fitting the stylescape. So the stylescape is not a thing to get done. It's a thing that's a visual communication tool to gain alignment. So don't do it just like you're trying to knock it off a checklist. So the mission statement, the words are important, but maybe the mission statement could be expressed in an image. What is it they're trying to do? Beyond make money, what is it they're trying to do? So it feels like a lot of celebration, closing deals, but not much else. Right? So if you remove all the images of people stretching and pumping their fists and super heroic images, there's not a lot that's on here. I learned this the hard way because the first person I actually hired to do a stylescape for me, outside of doing it myself, gave me something very similar to this. I was really disappointed. I'm like, I can't even present this. This is not what I want to do to capture the imagination of my client. Number 2, much better design. It's got an off-axis grid, like it's rotated 45 degrees, which I think is kind of cool. You have who I think is your customer. This is probably some kind of Asian medicine healthy thing, right? And again, I'm looking for what's going to inform the design direction. So if I see ingredients, which I do, and herbs and things like that, since I'm not going to be designing the herbs, what else can I do? What am I supposed to extract from this? So I know that there's a typeface. I know there's a color palette. But where's the rest of the stuff? Again, it's only a few notes, and I want more. I don't want an appetizer. I want the 7-course meal. Okay, last but not least, okay, much more sophisticated design, using the grids. I'm starting to get a better sense of the design aesthetic. So we're moving definitely in the right direction. But think about it. How much of this informs the design where you're going to go? Like, can we build a website off of this? Do we have enough here to design packaging? Can we design the interior to the building that this stuff is going to live in? Do we know enough? I love how specific the user is in this one. She's got really cool designer glasses and a hat, and she's highly just like, her ensemble is just perfect with a brooch and everything. It's just really clean, beautifully done. So there's a lot of aesthetic decisions being made. Like always, I wanted to go deeper. Okay, I only have a few more slides here, you guys, and then I'm going to jump into my keynote. I'm going to do some live designing with you guys, okay? So resources. So I don't know if Ben explained it to you, or maybe he did or didn't in the email, but this is a live call. I'm going to have to re-record this whole thing with the crew on another day and edit it so that it's just super clean and presented for you perfectly, or as perfect as we can make it. So the other things that will be coming your way is a Keynote PowerPoint template, an email script, the stylescape examples, the video course that we just talked about that I'm going to record and edit, a Photoshop demo, because one of the key things that you need to do, 2 key skills you have to develop, which is how to cut out images really quickly and how to isolate and color correct so that you can dial those colors in, and the actual call with the client with their feedback, and you can see how I navigate that discussion. Okay, so I'm going to open it up right now, although you guys have been asking questions all along. Anybody have a question? And then I'll step out of this and I'll screen share my Keynote deck document.
I want to
have a question.
I want to give the panelists a shot to ask questions first, and then Chris, I've got about 20 really good questions.
Okay, so before they ask the questions, I'm going to play this little animation.
Woo!
Pretty fancy, huh? Okay, I'm going to stop the share.
So
Okay.
Chris, just really quickly, did I hear you correctly in you saying that you do the color correction with the client on the phone?
No. I do not do the color correction on the phone.
Okay.
No. I don't do any work in front of the clients. I never do. That's not a good thing to do. That's a bad practice, right?
All right. Thanks for clarifying.
No, I said I'm going to record a video for you, or I'm going to show you how to cut out images really quickly, a couple different techniques that I use, and how to color correct and isolate images so that you can get your stylescapes all dialed in. I'm also going to share with you a recording where I present the stylescape and they give me feedback.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. And it's not perfect, you guys. You'll see me fumble. You'll see the client saying, nah, I don't know about this. All kinds of things.
Just one question. In terms of mock-ups, do you think we as designers should spend time like placing the logo marks or whatever we've designed onto mock-ups and putting them into the stylescapes?
I would do it in the fastest way possible. We're not
Right, because
trying
if
to
we
spend
have
a lot of time.
template.
Yes, if you have some things ready, I would go for it. You can see in some of the mock-ups that my designers made, because we really wanted to push the design through and paint as complete of a picture as possible for them. And that's why we did it that way.
And in terms of logo design, do you always design the logo before the stylescape is submitted, or is that done afterwards?
Well, part of the reasons why the logo process has been started is because I want to include some of that in the stylescape. I'll hold back the logo presentation, even though it's done sometimes, to integrate it into the stylescape in a kind of middle way where it's not quite done. So I can just gauge their reaction and get them more familiar and used to what is about to happen.
Okay.
So I have 2 children, right? And I went to see a family therapist and I said, you know, here's the thing. People, children, little people, aren't good with change. So when you walk into rooms like time to go to bed, they freak the F out, right? Because they went from playing, having a good time, for some person who arbitrarily walks in and decides very subjectively, your thing is going to end and then we're going to do something you don't like. So the way that you mitigate the pushback and the tantrums as you walk into the room is like, hey, you can keep playing, but in 30 minutes, I'm going to come back in this room and I'm going to tell you it's time to go to sleep. At which point, then you'll have 5 minutes to do that. See that little bit of a bridge really changes the entire complexion of the conversation and the reaction that they're going to have. So with your clients, it's kind of like doing the same. Instead of saying, hey, you know that logo that you used to love? Here's some brand new thing. I'm just going to smash it in your face. Even if it's good, it's new, it's foreign, it feels like you're attacking them and it feels hostile. So what I usually do is I show them some kind of middle area where it's like 80% done. And they're like, oh, it's non-committal. We like this. And you can see in that one project with 450 Alaskan, how many logos we did that we just all threw away because they want to go with something super modern.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I ask a general question?
Yes, of course.
Okay, this is because I spent all the money I have left on the stylescape first.
Oh, no.
Actually gets this thing going because okay, I've written it down so no context regarding graphics designer who struggle financially and are uncomfortable to accept any money. Do you have experience with people having the same struggle, and which advice would you give them?
Okay. I thought I understood the question. Who's struggling with money right now?
Me personally,
Okay.
I grow up poor and have I would say a very distorted and morally distorted thought about money. And always when a customer comes to me to give me money for a project, I usually want to give him money for the gas for the car and give him some food. And if he forces me to take the money, I can sleep for a week. So
Okay.
I know I have to solve the problem, but it takes years, and I always I get stuck at the same problem.
Okay. Have you gone to see a therapist about this?
Specifically for that problem, no, but it's actually in the works with a therapist.
Okay. I would encourage you to do that. There's some deep mindset work that we would need to do together. And that's a real problem that you're talking about. One, I think I can help you with, but in the context of how much time we have and what we're trying to solve on this call, I'm gonna have to just table that, right?
Yeah.
So I want you to reach out to me on Facebook and DM me on Facebook saying, hey, I was on the Future Pro call. I have an issue with accepting money, and I'll see if we can figure out something
Okay.
with you. Okay.
Thank you very much.
I can't promise you anything, but at least I can give it more thought and give you a more considered response.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Yes, you're welcome. Ben, should we dive in pretty soon?
I was sitting here on mute again. Gah. Do you want to do questions now or the demo now?
Yeah, I'll do questions and then we'll do the demo.
Okay. I have a whole bunch, so buckle your seatbelt. Thank you, everybody. The Q&A is probably now closed because we have so many, and we'll dig into some of the good ones. All right, so Nutrisail asks, how is a stylescape different from a mood board?
It's not. It's not any different than a mood board or a style tile or anything else. It's the intention in which you do it with and how specific you are in the creation or curation of images and the overall feeling. So a lot of people will create a mood board. I know what a mood board was. I made mood boards in school, but there's a giant gap between the feeling and the reaction that you get from making a mood board for yourself versus the way that we teach you how to do it here. I think the better question is to invert that question onto you and say, have I shown you something? Have I talked about something here that sheds new light on how much intention and purpose that you're supposed to spend on these things? Then maybe you can answer the question for me. Because I can say that I've done things like this for a really long time, but never like this with the results that I get from doing a stylescape, the way that we teach you how to do it. You can see in the 3 examples that I critiqued, they look the same format, there's colors, there's images, and there's type. But you can imagine in your mind, I think the response that you would get that would be radically different between showing them what I taught you how to do versus one of the ones I critiqued. And if you can't see that, let's talk about that.
And what would be interesting is if you created a mood board, the way that mood boards are traditionally created, and then you created stylescapes and presented to the client both, and see how much explanation you have to do with a mood board versus a stylescape. So compositionally, it lends itself to a much cleaner process. There's a lot less explanation that you have to give the client.
Yeah, you know what? The question could be something like this. What's the difference between one art gallery and another? Well, they have walls, they have lighting, and there's artwork on it. But the person who has a museum director or the gallery director who starts staging everything from moment to moment so that when you navigate your way through the entire exhibit, you walk out with a distinctly different feeling. So it begins with everything from the invitation to how you walk through the space, how it's broken up, how you see pieces of artwork, in what order, even down to the captions on next to the paintings. It would be now next to impossible, I think, for you to go back and do it the way that you used to do it without being influenced by the way that I'm telling you to do it and what the intent is. Your goal is not to just slapdash a bunch of things together and kind of like hope for the best. There's a strategy, a process, and a framework for you to apply to keep it very hyper-focused so that you can guide the client through what you think is a custom vacation for their mind or their brand. That's really what you're trying to do. So I don't ever want to put anything in my mood board, my style tile, my stylescape that isn't directly reflecting an idea or some direction I want to bring them. It's not like here are 1,000 materials, let's like pick one together. It's not like that at all.
All right, next question. This one comes from Stefan. They asked, how do you explain a stylescape to a client? So I'll give you a situation. We deliver a proposal, a client looks at the proposal and they say, hey, there's this word on here that I'm not familiar with, stylescape. What is that?
Okay, so you just need to explain to them. And that's why I included my definition of what a stylescape is. It's the bridge between design thinking strategy and design making. It's the perfect middle ground. And another way to explain it is you can think of it as a design sprint. So you can say in the software product design world, when you're doing UX, you don't want to go through a long and lengthy process of developing an app only later to find out function that doesn't meet your requirements, B, it's for the wrong person. So you do sprints. We understand that. We understand prototyping. So Stylescape is us prototyping your brand. It's like I've given you 3 ways to explain it. Pick whichever one that you think is most natural for you.
I always say, as we embark on this journey together, it's really hard to get to the destination if you don't know where you're going. And the Stylescapes helps us set that broad compass direction for the brand. North, west, east, south, that kind of thing. All right, next one comes from Jesse. They ask, why are Stylescapes such an odd size?
Oh, excellent question. Forgot to explain that. The Stylescapes that we do are 2.5 times wide versus a standard HD screen. And the reason why we do it wide is because it's a narrative. It's a story that you try to tell from upper left to right, and it's a landscape. Now, the reason why we also do it this way versus vertical is because vertical starts to lock people in, especially because a lot of people use Stylescapes to design websites, into thinking, is this my website? And that's not what it's meant to be at all. So we do it deliberately as a landscape versus a skyscraper format, is so that they don't ask those questions. We're trying to tell a story. So it's a panel. In comic book panels, you just want to read left to right and you want to flow through it.
All right, next question. Now, this group of questions is all about dealing with difficult clients.
Mm-hmm.
So Jason asks, when displaying a piece of print design collateral, for example, how likely is it that the client is going to compare what you've done with what you showed in the Stylescape? Do you ever have an issue there?
It's never happened to us before. And I wonder why they would bring that up. Let's get into the mindset. Bring that person online. I want to do a really quick role play with them.
Okay, I'm going to do that.
Okay, and then let's knock out another question.
All right. Okay, so I'm going to ask you another question while I bring Jason online.
Yeah.
So Helio asks, have you ever had an experience where the client is so attached to the Stylescape that it limits you in the design process and stuff like that?
Yes, I want them to get really attached to the Stylescape. I put a lot of time and energy and effort into the Stylescape, and now we're going to then do design work against it. And that's my compass. Like, what's here? Okay, this is an excellent point or a question that you're bringing up. So some designers that I hire will do a Stylescape, and then they show me the design. I'm like, well, what did you do the Stylescape for? Because this looks nothing like it. You just wasted my time and the client's. Like, aren't you looking at your own Stylescape? That's the whole point. Don't sell me on a modern house with a minimal interior with these kinds of finishes and those kinds of appliances, only to turn around and give me a ranch style house with molding on the wall. It just doesn't work.
All right. Awesome answer. Jason is now online and ready to chat.
Jason, talk to me.
Hey, what's going on, Chris?
So you have a
Is it
design
echoing?
aesthetic. It's a little echoey.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
You're still pretty echoey, but that's okay.
I got it, guys. Should be good.
Okay, Ben solved the problem. Okay.
Cool.
The issue that you're having is your work looks nothing like the Stylescape. And so the clients are pushing back potentially. And you've never done this before. You're just worried about some future that has not yet happened, right?
Yeah, I've never presented a Stylescape. There's been mood boards where, you reference the potential artwork and the direction that you can push. I was
Yes.
just curious to see if you've had like certain designers where they're boxing themselves into the print samples that they've showed to the client. In the sense of like plagiarism, like, oh, like we really love the way that this layout looks. We love the art direction, the aesthetic. How are you gonna make it like you're not just gonna replace the body text with art text?
No, you don't do that. So
Right,
I'm
right.
going to find you guys an example. You remember the School of Motion thing? I'm going to pull up an example. I'm going to share that with you. And you can see like where we went from and where we go with it.
Yeah, that's essentially what I would like to know. Yeah, is
Yeah.
getting from point A to B without pretty much like plagiarizing.
Okay. The only way you would plagiarize it is literally if you trace on top of a layout because you can't extract the
Yeah.
ingredients yourself. So I'm expecting a level of competency from each person to say like, look, I like these gradients, and I'm going to show you in a second here as soon as I pull up the file, okay? Give me a second to do that. But if the clients, I mean, you're like now shifting the question a little bit, aren't you? The first question is, what if they push back and say, that looks nothing like your work, and why would I look at this stylescape, right? Wasn't that your first question?
The first question was about the print samples that you show to a client versus what you then make afterwards. I think it was the first stylescape that you presented. There was like variable assets that you did like a little display icon of like different print designs. And so I was just seeing if that heavily influences designers as, oh, they really love this print design and layout. Now we got to make it our own.
Are you talking about the very first thing I said? Like, here's a stylescape and here's what it can create for you?
Yeah.
Well, those are actually designed. I'm
Right.
just showing you the whole process. So we actually made
Okay.
those.
Oh,
fit in.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
they weren't just pulled off the internet and just slapping on a logo.
Gotcha. Okay, see, that's where I had kind of slight confusions.
Yeah,
in
I was
terms
just
of
saying like the scope can grow, and I'm trying to paint that desired future state. So then they ask for more and more stuff, and it's fantastic because I know exactly what to do, and they get really excited about that.
Yeah, gotcha.
Apparently, I can't walk and chew gum at the same time, so I need a minute to find the Dropbox folder here, which for some reason I can't even seem to find it.
So, Chris, you touched on a couple of really good points there, and Jasmine and Kevin both asked questions about this whole plagiarizing thing. What happens when the client gets so attached to one thing and they want exactly that? And in the chat, I think that Darian, actually, I love what he said here. I'm going to read it. He says, bake a cake that tastes like the one that you brought from the store. Don't resell the cake that you bought and say you baked it.
Yeah.
Love that. And guys,
I think
sophisticated clients will know that you can't exactly copy one thing. And if you have to explain that you can't plagiarize a design, that's just, it kind of speaks to that level of client that you're working with. And sometimes you have to educate those people.
Wait, hold on. Everybody needs to understand something. This is about context and expectations. So you can tell a little story. I like to tell stories, okay? So stories help you guys. So hopefully this will put this issue to bed, because there's a lot of issues like, oh, copyright infringement. Okay, let's get into it. You can say to your client, literally this. In the past, I would talk to a client just like you. You would tell me what you want, and I would disappear for weeks. And I would present something to you. Most of the times it would work out, but every once in a while, my clients would freak out because it's not what they were expecting. There's some problems inherent with this. One, time marches on and we can't get it back. Two, you're not seeing any progress on what it is that I'm doing. So that you could be sitting there worried that I'm not doing anything or I'm doing the wrong thing. So I've put in a very vital step in my process so that we eliminate that. So after we have our conversation, I'm going to come back to you with a stylescape. And what the stylescape is, it's a quick glimpse into where we could possibly go. And all I've done is I've gone on the internet, I've curated a lot of images that I did not make to see if we're sharing the same vision moving forward. The hope is I understand you, but the commitment is relatively low and it's pretty quick. So instead of seeing something in weeks, you'll see something in days. If you want to change something, we can and we should. But just keep in mind that these are images that I took from other creative sources. We cannot literally do one of those things because that would run into copyright issues, which I don't want to do. You won't feel good about it. I especially will not feel good about it, and it's not legal. What more do you need? So you're just priming them, right? You got to explain it with words, people. Communicate to them what it is. Shouldn't be a problem.
All right, are we ready to move on to the next question?
Yes, but before we do, I'm going to show this thing. I wasn't planning on showing this thing, but I'm going to share it right now.
Okay.
Because there's so many questions about like where this goes. I could see there's a lot of confusion. So I'm going to take this moment, right? So we talked about the school of motion and the words and all that kind of stuff, right? So I'm going to show you how we do this. This is their brand guideline, and there's some revisions we need to make to it. I'm going to skip over some of the strategic parts here. We'll get into logo. So we're just showing them. This is the lockup, right? And this is the color palette. and we expand the color palette by doing these gradients, and we even name the colors something that's in keeping with the theme thematically. School bus yellow, sticky note cyan, lunchbox green. Okay, we tell them what their typefaces are supposed to be like, and then we show them this. This is what your stationery is going to look like, potentially. So you can see it's not the stylescape, but it's heavily informed by the stylescape. There's no risk of us being sued or people are like, man, it's the same thing. It's not the same thing. See the big type and the overlapping?
That cake tastes a lot like the stylescape.
Now, this one in particular is an asset that we can use that we've purchased. It's stock. You guys see this? Do you understand now what we're doing? The gradients, the overlapping shapes. This is like built off that style that's some of you guys that are designers would know. It's called Memphis style, certain patterns. So we're showing them all their assets. Thumbnail design. You guys can see this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anybody have any questions so far? Lower third, see? It's all being built off that. This is not some kind of hack, cheat, cutting things short process. We're not doing that at all. Look at these shapes. Like, here are some assets that you can use. We need to make some revisions to this. Here are the illustrations. And you can even use textures in your gradients so that they're not flat. And if you have to make pie charts, this is what it would look like.
Quick question about the guide.
Yes.
Will the stylescape be will be a part of the future line, like the guide or any other products? Okay.
No, it's an internal communication tool. And when you start including in things like this, I think you may run the risk of getting into some trouble should it be shared out in the world, okay? It's a tool that I use to speak to a client to gauge where we need to go. George Lucas, famously for Star Wars, used some World War II footage, cut it together so that he can shoot. It was used internally to tell the editors what kind of shots we need to do, and then he recreated all the shots. Only years later that people find out, like, oh, that's what they did. Okay, I get it.
So I kind of want to bring things back to Jason, and you were about to address something that a lot of people are interested in. The concern that they're not going to be able to meet what they put in the stylescape.
The design gap?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. It's a real problem, especially for a lot of you, I think. Here's what I know. It's very hard to invent something. It's even harder to invent it when you don't know what the thing is you're trying to make. But if I showed you, it's a serif typeface, find a serif typeface. It's a gold foil treatment. You can pretty quickly reverse engineer anything. I'll tell you something. I used to teach at Art Center. I would have lower term students come into my class and say, Chris, teach us how to design. I'm like, well, I'm trying to surround you. I'm going to tell you to teach me how to design. And they would be shocked. Like, what do you mean? Didn't we pay you money so you could teach us? I said, no, I'm going to teach you how to learn. So I'm going to assign you one frame from a master. They're using 3D photography. It probably costs, in no short measure, tens of thousands of dollars to produce each one of these moments in time, because there's a big team behind this. I'm gonna give you 2 weeks. I need you to teach me how to make it. So they have a reference point. It's called the master copy. I said, you need to make something as close as possible to this without using a single freaking pixel from this image. You understand? Like, okay. So one image was from some giant robot smashing each other movie by Guillermo del Toro, I think. And it had 3D robots in it. And the person who was assigned this, like, I don't know 3D. I don't know Cinema 4D. I don't know any of these programs. I said, well, get really creative then. You know what they wound up doing? They went to a toy store that had really amazing 3D robots. I mean, built robots, models. They brought their cameras. Like, I have a student assignment. Do you mind if I take some pictures of these robots? And the person was more than like excited to share with them. Like, yeah, take it out of the box. Like, let's lay it on the table. Took photographs, went back in, color corrected, relit it, added smoke and added elements. They were able to recreate the whole thing without using a single part of the original image. They were so good, in fact, that during the critique, many of them, as I was doing the A/B and talking about the original versus theirs, I got confused sometimes. And I actually started to reference their work and referred back to the masters as the student work. I swapped them around. So guys, when you look at an image, you can pretty quickly reverse engineer what happens. The only thing that you're lacking, in my opinion, is that original reference to say it looks like this. But that's what your design talent is for. You can do it.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on, Jason. And you can hang out. We'd love to look at your face some more. But let's move on to a couple more questions.
We are now over time.
We are over time. Yes.
And how do we do this? I think we could sit here and answer questions all day, but eventually I'll fall over, and that'll be that.
I have 2 questions that I think we should answer.
Okay, let's do those.
The rest we can
knock them out.
Awesome. So this first question comes from both Ella and Jesse. This is still in the dealing with difficult clients arena here. It's not a high budget job. My client only wants me to do X, Y, and Z. What if it's a small job? This question was asked a lot. Do we even do stylescapes? If there's no strategy, how do we even do this?
Yeah. So the answer is this. If you like guessing, don't do it. If you want those revisions to come at you like late at night, don't do it. If you love that process, don't introduce stylescapes as part of your thing. Now, here's the thing. What we're talking about is a vicious cycle, okay? And the cycle goes something like this. You have a low budget client asking you to do low budget work, and they pay you a little bit of money. So you can't afford to put more effort into it because you feel like, oh, I'm going to resent you and this is going to suck. So you just do it as fast as possible. And sometimes in doing it as fast as possible, you get it right. And quite oftentimes you get it wrong. And then you have to just keep doing that. So then the work is compromised. You remember the whole thing? I went through the whole process with you. And you just keep doing that. So what's going to attract a better client? Well, not showing them compromised work. That's not going to help you. So somewhere in here, you have to just bite the bullet and say, I want to do something better. And you just eat the cost of the time. But you're going to realize really quickly how much less time you're wasting doing things that nobody's going to like. You remove all the anxiety, the stress, the friction that both you and the client feel around these big reveals. Okay, so I'll give you some numbers here, okay? And I think I can talk about it because Joey said you can talk about whatever you want. Joey paid us $20,000 to help him redesign the School of Motion brand. We agreed early on that I'm going to be able to film it as part of the compensation. I could talk about it in real time, part of the compensation. And he will provide documentation of what he thought as a client to make this a really great learning opportunity for all our students. $20,000 doesn't even get you a conversation with me. We charge $30,000 just to do strategy at the minimum, But we're doing all this work. As you can see, I thumbed through a 60-page document that designs almost everything that they need. So really, I did a very fast, facilitated discussion with them by using the brand messaging kit that we sell. And then I quickly identified attributes with them. And then we went and just made one stylescape. It's necessary because could you imagine trying to do all those pieces of collateral and not knowing if he's going to like it? Now, luckily, in the stylescape process, he made 2 revisions. I presented him the guideline, which is pretty much almost all the work done. He had some very poignant feedback. We're going to go take another stab at it, and hopefully we'll be almost done. And that's a lot more bearable than trying to do this 5 times. I promise you, if it's painful, it'll be a lot less painful with the stylescape as part of your process. Do it. The work gets better. You feel more confident. You feel more exhilarated. You're going to fall in love with design again and not feel like you're being browbeaten down by the client. Let's get that spark back inside of you. Let's turn that little ember into a raging inferno. And you can do this. And this can reverse the process. Okay? You don't need to know strategy, schmategy. You don't need to do any of that. You just need to say, like, what 3 words can we commit to that's part of that framework I just shared with you that describes our brand, our design, our goal, whatever it is you want. Just translate those thoughts and feelings from that limit brain into words. Then take those words and make it visual as fast as possible. That's how you're going to be able to do this.
Mohammed said, just take the blue pill. Just do it.
You already spent the money. We're not giving you a refund. So
All right.
let's just do it. Let's
So-
do it.
Next and final question. This comes from Kyle and many, many others.
I'm going to say this first before you say that, Ben. I'm going to do
Okay.
my Arnold impersonation. Do it now. Just do it. That's it. Do it. All right. Go ahead, Ben.
All right, last and final question. Where on earth does this fit in to the overall process? So the client calls you, they're just a lead. Is this part of the pitching process? Is this a part of the proposal? Does this come after when you design the style guide? Where does this fit in?
I thought I shared with you that flow of where it fits in. I do not design stylescapes for free. I actually do very little for free. They need to be committed. They're going to purchase whatever idea that you have, and then you're going to go in and you're going to say, okay, I just want you to do this thing. Don't reinvent the wheel here. I want you to get a small, quick win. Put money in your pocket, feel more confident, do better design. And I just want you to insert the stylescape before you actually do any design. After you talk to the client and before you actually do any work yourself, insert the stylescape. Don't change everything that you do. If you can, the next project that you provide an estimate for, introduce a new line item, call it stylescape, and charge $1,000 for it. At worst, they'll say, no, what is this? And you say, fine, you know what? I'm going to do it for you because I think it's so valuable for you. And don't worry about it. And the next one, you insist that's there. And you're going to say, you love those results? That's how I got those results. And if you don't want to do that, perhaps I'm not the right person for you. But you must love gambling. You must love guessing. You must love Pepto-Bismol because there's going to be a lot of anxiety for you. You know, send them a box of antacids afterwards. Because think about it. It's like a designer goes into a black hole. This is the beginning of a joke. A designer goes into a black hole and disappears. What they come out with, we have no freaking idea.
Well, on the tactical side, guys, we typically say discovery costs X amount. It's usually somewhere between $90,000 and $200,000. And the discovery you get, and then it lists out the things that are included in discovery. And one of those things is stylescapes, along with strategy. So you can scale that down or up if you need to, but charge for discovery and include stylescapes as part of that process.
Okay, Ben. We are at the we're 13 minutes over time here on the shot clock, but I'm not gonna let you guys go because I need to do a really quick demo for you. Okay, I promise I would do this. And so here we go. We're gonna share my.
While you're setting that up, can I ask a quick logistical question?
Yeah, only took me 1 second, but go ahead.
Yeah, will we get the links to the resources that you mentioned in this before we have to submit the? Okay, great, cool.
Well, before I don't know. That's gonna be on Ben. Like
I'll go over what the homework assignment is and all that kind of stuff after Chris is done.
Yeah, so we're gonna have to like peel apart this sucker. So this is a Keynote document that I have, and if you're not familiar with Keynote, don't worry because you can use any program you want. You can use InDesign. I mean, heaven forbid, you can use Photoshop. You can use all these things, but I'll show you how fast you could do this. This template has already been set up for you. Okay. Now I took an HD image, 1920 by 1080, and then I scaled it down. So these are all relatively, you know, proportionate to that. Some of these I did 4:3 because a lot of the photos and assets you're going to get off the internet, it's going to be 4:3. Some of them I did portrait, some I did landscape. Okay, that's essentially what I did. So I'm going to show you now really quickly. I'm going to jump into this because I already have some reference assets here. I'm going to show you how quickly we can build these things. Now, let's just say this is our color. So this is our color right here. You guys can see this, right? You can see this. I'm moving around. And the really cool thing about Keynote is you can make each one of these boxes or any shape a placeholder. So as soon as you drag an image into it, it's going to pop and it's going to stick there. So it's pretty awesome. So let's just say like I'm going to go into industrial, right? So I have some images here. I'm just going to find some stuff. Let's say I like this piece of leather for Mr. Lewis and I want to find a home for it. I'm going to put it right there. So all I have to do is drag it in there and then I can shift it around by double clicking on it. It's going to be pretty awesome. And you're going to see this stylescape appear magically appear before your eyes. You know, maybe I like this piece of wood. I don't know. I'm just going to drop it in there. So I'm just going to go in and just populate this sucker. Okay. It shouldn't be that hard to do. I need to switch to my browser mode here. So let's just say I like this piece of design. I'll put it here. That's why you want to do this in Keynote. It moves so fast. And the cool part is if you don't like it, just drag another image in it. It's amazing. And if you want to scale it up or scale it down, you can do anything you want. That's how easy it is. So let's just say I like that part. This is where I get really picky with my creatives. And I think if you just want to show the paper folding effect, do not show me the whole thing, just crop into it. Okay? That's really all you want to do. Now, I wanted to show you that this shape is on a bias. It's on an angle. This is probably not a good image to use with this, but you see, like you can create custom shapes and you can put different things in them. It's super easy to do. I think I want to put this one here. Okay. And we could use shapes to be containers for people. We can use those shapes to do color palettes. So if I'm doing something that's inspired by this round pixies thing, that's all it takes. So really, I'm just going to go and populate this sucker with stuff. Like there's some type examples. This makes no freaking sense. This is the exact opposite of what I tell you to do because I'm doing things willy-nilly. There is no intention here. I'm just trying to get this thing done. That's how easy it is to work inside of Keynote. And if you've gone through and created your image buckets carefully, it'll happen really quickly. Now, things that I'm looking for, contrast, color palette, like these images, like this gray image next to this, it's very similar, right? So I don't want to put things like that next to it. I'm looking for contrast there. And I don't want things that are just perfectly flat. I want to include things that are dimensional. It breaks up the grid. Let's just say I like this corner of it. So I'm going to scale this up. I'm going to bring it down here. It's just like, I want that much of it. Now there's a little funny corner down here. So I'm going to scale it down. I can talk and walk and chew gum at the same time. So those are the guys that are in the panelists with us. Feel free to ask me any questions while I'm working on this.
And
Hey,
I want
Chris.
you guys to notice that Chris is pulling in a whole bunch of different stuff. So we got a lot of questions about, oh, can I use this for web? Can I use this for X, Y, and Z? And the answer is yes. But what you want to do is you want to stick to that list, the list that we will provide to you of things to put in here. Type treatments, design, stationery, packaging, interior design. You want to paint the picture of the brand as a whole, because what that's going to do for you later on is the client might see something in there that they love and ask you to do it. And so your scope starts to get bigger, which means the project starts to get bigger, which means you start to get richer.
And except for one person in this group has issues with money, everybody else is okay with making money, right?
Yeah. Okay. I thought I heard a panelist chime in.
Yep, that was me. Hey, Chris, I just had a question for you about context. You were talking about the decision-making process between 1 and 3 stylescapes, or 1 and however you might want to do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Could you share a little bit more on your mindset as to how you would make that decision?
Okay, usually the bigger the engagement, the more they want to feel like they're getting their money's worth. And I know stylescapes are a fun thing for us to do. We enjoy actually making them quite a bit, right? So we'll do 3. We like to do 3. Sometimes when I'm pressed for time or when I know what needs to be done and it's super clear to me in my head already, then I will do 1. But usually when there's only 1, there's always that question in their mind, like, is this the right one?
Yeah, what could have been or whatever.
That's
Yeah.
right. So that'll just drive people insane.
Sure.
If you don't want that to happen to you, then yeah, consider that, right?
Yep. Cool. Thanks.
Yeah. So as you guys can see, I'm just dropping images in here or whatever. It's not terribly hard. Didn't take a lot of time. I don't like, maybe I don't like this. So the cool thing too is you can take the shape and you can just hold down shift and you can scale it up. So those are 2 not good images next to each other, obviously for contrast reasons, right? I don't even know where this thing would live. It probably needs to live over here somewhere. And the cool thing about this is if you turn on the guide function in this, in here somewhere, I don't want to show you. I don't know where it is right now, but all those things snap. And I just love how intelligently it snaps to edges, but you do have to turn that thing on. Okay, so I'm missing a person here. I need to find a person, and luckily in my folder of stuff I have tons of people already cut out. So I'm gonna try and find them right now.
And there were a lot of questions about, is it good to only pick one person? Like, how do you pick that hero? Where does that come from? And that's the intended user. So as you guys break down those users with the client and try and grasp an understanding of their customers or their users, that's the person that you want to put on this. And we talked a little bit about that in the empathy graph, but this stylescape should appeal to one archetype. And so when you guys are designing this at home, you want to think about who that ideal client is. Are they female entrepreneurs? Are they outdoor enthusiasts? Who's that ideal client, and encapsulate that in one person?
Okay, so I have this person here, right? So she's ready to go, and I like her in there because she breaks the grid. She's super dynamic. She has full personality. And you know what I like? That she's in this action pose, and then there's these cards tumbling through space, and it seems to work. Her colors are kind of jiving with this. Now, this is all over the place, and it's not meant to be anything other than a demo for you. So you could build another stylescape, and it could look totally different, like this one, which I also built. So same elements, you can see that they're just cropped differently. And this is a different grid. This image, that's just type, and then there's this shape, which you can make these kinds of shapes. They're very easy to do. And I'll show you a little trick here. And many of you guys who use Keynote, you're like, yeah, I know that trick. Basically, there are tons of shapes, and any shape that's from this library can become an image holder. Like if you want to put a person's face inside another person, you can do it. Like, let's just say I like ducks, right? Let's just say. So I scale this duck up, and I needed an element in here somewhere. And this is I think more shapes have been included in the latest version of Keynote. Let's just say I want to take this person who's drowning. I want to drop it in there, and I think I can just hover over it, and it'll put that person in it. I have to move them around. So there's a person's hand. You can see there. Maybe I need to scale this down so you guys can see a little bit better. Now there's a person drowning inside the duck. Any shape that's created inside Keynote can become an image holder, right? Like maybe this duck is thinking about that.
Quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Did you guys ever made an animated stylescape or parts with animation?
No, we haven't. But if you add animation to anything, the clients are, woo, wow, right? And we don't animate because the whole reason of a stylescape or prototyping is you want to move really fast. You want to get into the design work quickly without a lot of commitment from you or the client. The longer it takes you to make something, the more you fall in love with your own design, period. And the number one rule in Scarface is do not get high on your own supply. So don't do it. Be very, very careful. Okay, so now I'm gonna go into my graphics library because I have so much more stuff in here.
Chris, is there a way you can share kind of the selection you're choosing from? I don't know if that's
my screens are massive, guys. And I'm working like just totally willy-nilly here. It's like you want me to show you my underwear or something. It's like, yeah, you're not gonna want to see it.
Fair enough.
Okay, because I have thousands of images and I have these two giant screens over here. So yeah, it's not gonna look good. That's a terrible image of that.
Chris has so many images, he's literally banned from our company Dropbox.
That's awesome. So I was watching one of the Stylescape videos you did years ago with Jose.
Yeah.
You saying that he prints them out at a company that no longer exists, Kinko's. And so do you guys, kind of, it would answer the question of whether or not you did animation. If you did them analog and printed them out, that answers that. But how do you guys do the Stylescapes and present them these days?
I think Ben printed them out recently. So Ben, tell them where you got it printed.
Yeah, anytime you have a local client, I mean, having something physical, having something that you can put on a table, it's like animating something. It's just that wow factor. And seeing something at, 50 inches wide is just an amazing thing for the client to be able to visualize. So I just love presenting these things in person, printed out. So if you can do that, it's worth the $100 to do that. Digitally though, we usually present them on a call like we're doing right now, and they're typically in 3 slides. And so slide 1 shows the piece as the whole. And then we say, all right, let's start to dig in here. And then we zoom in to the first half and we walk them through the pieces that we've chosen for that first half. Then we get into the second half. And so the resolution, the dimensions of this thing fit on 1920 by 1080 twice perfectly. So that's the way we do it digitally.
Okay, I think I'm done here, and I'm just gonna answer any final few questions here. You'll notice that I'm all going bananas here because one of my things that I have to do, because people are like, "Do you design anymore?" I'm like, "Not really, unless you consider doing keynotes and presentations." Because what I do is I have a gigantic folder of sometimes legally obtained and sometimes illegally obtained images where I cut up and I'm all prepared. So these jumper cables come from Shutterstock. We have one of those crazy plans where we can download 350 images from Shutterstock a month, and we could never seem to exhaust our supply of credits, right? So these jumper cables come from that. And what I do is I just go and I cut stuff up all the time. And that way I have assets that can be reused for infinity. So I don't know what that doesn't make any sense in this composition or tell any kind of a story, unless it comes from the coffee maybe.
But it's really nice that that element kind of breaks the grid, right? It overlaps.
Yeah, you're
stuff.
looking for things like that,
Yeah.
you know?
So compositionally, it's cool.
I have so many things like this where there's an object. Like I just happen to have a blood orange because I don't know why, but I have so many things. I have grenades. Like, look, if I want to throw a grenade, let me look for it right now. There you go, grenades.
Quick question. Do you think the online version of Keynote that's available on the iCloud website would work for this?
Same thing.
Same thing?
I think
Great,
it's
okay.
almost exactly the same. Yeah.
So then for Windows users, you don't really need to purchase anything except make a iCloud account.
No, and I would give you the PowerPoint version of this, but I just like the elegance and the way this thing works, right? So look, I mean, you can also go in and you can just drop a little drop shadow on this thing because it wants to separate. Or you can do a contact shadow, which is different. So it looks like it's sitting there. See that, guys? Super, super easy. So
yeah,
easy.
I
to do.
just
I'll scale this
got,
up
I just got InDesign to do stylescapes. So
Oh, InDesign is perfect because Min, she'll use InDesign. She's not a keynote
okay,
believer.
great.
Yeah. And it
Yeah, I
hasn't
use
hurt her
Photoshop.
ability. You know, she's still doing great. So you see like right here, this white space, then around these two circles, I'm going to change it because so that you guys can see that there's color or negative space in there. And so here, this design is not meant to be cut off that short. So I'm going to grab these handles and bring them in. It'll snap right to it. So it's beautiful. So I can scale this down, right? And now I can leave this here. So that adds a nice hit of color and I can duplicate it. There's lots of things I can do. And if I position this like right here and bring her back to the top, front, all the way to the front, it adds a nice element there. So you can see that, right? And the thing I wanted to show you is like shapes. You can use Shape Builder, right? So basically any of these shapes can be combined to make other shapes. So if you wanted to take, for whatever reason, you wanted a square with a hole cut out of it like this, hold on Shift when you drag this up, right? And then I want to take a circle now and put it right there and also scale this up a little bit. I want to make that red so you guys can see it. Now I want to make this a little bit bigger so you can see it. So if I select these two shapes, I just go to Format, what is it called? Shapes and Lines. I want to subtract the shapes. Now to create a thing with a hole in it, which is pretty cool. But wait, and there's more. So if I take this image now, I can drag it right in there and I'm going to move it around just for knowledge ahead, right? So now I have an image with a hole in it, which is super complicated, but it plays off this theme here. So if I were just doing like that. Now that's a horrible image because it's too complicated. I need to do something that's just mostly color. Let me do this melted popsicle. It's not going to work. So basically I have to select this, and if you hit Command, Option, Control I, it makes it a placeholder. See that little thing that just popped up right there? I can take this sucker and I can drop it right in. And now at least I have a color, and that's really all I wanted, because otherwise it's too complicated. It's a little bit too big, so I'll scale this thing down more like that size. So this is now just design problem, right? Working out this stuff.
Hey, Chris, can I ask you a question real quick?
Of course, of course.
I wanted to go back just a bit. I can't remember the client's name, but the one with the maps and the shipping containers that you went ahead and do those.
The Alaskan?
Yeah. At what point in the process did you say, yeah, you know what, let's spend some extra time doing these mock-ups and show them a few more like custom aesthetic things to really sell this idea through? Was it sort of based on this client and, you know, you having their trust a little bit more? Because I guess me personally, and this is just ignorance of how to correctly use Stylescapes, is that Stylescapes were built to save you time where you're not really spending any time doing mockups and things like that before you establish an aesthetic versus going ahead and taking that extra step to sell the idea through.
Yeah, so the larger the engagement, the more you're going to want to show fidelity and that you're doing your due diligence and exploring ideas, and the clients just love it, right? So this client, we've already have a relationship with, and the first time that we presented them a project, we kind of went bananas, but it was already $100,000 project at that point. As soon as we did some work on the Stylescape, that project blew up to a $250,000 project. And before we even did real design work, we just did strategy. And then we did Stylescapes and presented them that document. 3 days later, they called me and said, we have 2 more projects, $250,000 each. Can you do them? So I turned a $100,000 job to $250 to $750 within a week of getting the project. So you kind of, like I said, you guys, for some of you guys, your eyeballs are rolling into the back of your head right now. Like, how was that possible? Because, you know, we love to design. You guys, you all know this, right? Everybody that's a creative person, a maker, you love to do what it is that you do. I just want to help you guys get paid fairly for it so that you can continue loving it and continue doing it. That's all. So if you do Stylescapes, what it's trying to save you from is doing unnecessary work that requires you to change stuff. That's the difference. Because your favorite projects, you basically, the deadline is what pulls you off of it. And the same kind of project, underfunded, asking you to make unlimited changes, all of a sudden becomes a nightmare project. So the difference is usually, where do you put your energy? I'm just trying to get you to not do work that's unnecessary. Because you can love your design. You can love the whole process. And it should be good. So I'm done. The reason why I'm moving images around, because I don't like some of the contrast here. It's also very gridded out, you guys. So if you don't like the grid, you can break the grid. And I'll show you one little trick here besides this hole punch thing, right? So this image is HD, right? 1920 by 1080. Like I can even remove that and that'll be good. I actually like that better without it, right? But what you do is you do this. So you need to do, let's say you need to do 3 high. Like you want to make a grid that's 3 high, right? Which I don't have. I guess I do have here. All you do is do this. You duplicate this once, duplicate again, holding an option. You select all 3 and you do Command Option G, which groups it. And then you scale all 3 back down. It's the only way to let you do it in the program, right? And then you take them all and you do Command Option Shift G and it ungroups it. Now you have 3 placeholders. You can do anything you want. You can put them anywhere, okay? That's how I do it. So you can continue to do that for 6 high if you wanted to. You can do it for 8 high. So if you feel like you want to include more shapes, you want it to be a denser grid, which somebody mentioned before, then that's how you do it. I just like having the color, so I'll replace this one. So it's missing some typography because I definitely think that's necessary. Without it, I just don't feel right because my team's going to design something and they need typographic references. It's missing some textures, so maybe a 3D object somewhere in here. I have many of those such objects, but I think you guys get the gist of this, right? So I will save this file and you guys can have the file and do with it as you wish. This is a transparency. I just created a shape and cut it off. That's the kid, you know. Of course, I like cutting things out, so there we go. And that's it. Any final questions before we kind of wrap this up?
So I'll fill in some logistical details real quick. Basically, after we close this call, it's going to take a little bit for this video to render. Once the video is rendered, I will upload the call to the course today so you guys can re-watch it. Chris is going to recap the homework assignment here in a minute, but we will collect submissions by Thursday night in order for us to review and critique the stuff on Friday. The Friday call will be scheduled in advance. You'll get an email all about all this, so you don't have to take notes too extensively now. Just know that you have 3 or 4 days to complete this homework assignment, which should be plenty of time. If you find yourself spending too much time on one version, stop being a perfectionist and
Stop, drop, and roll.
yeah, let's get things going. The PDF I'm going to try and upload as well today so that you guys can have things like the checklist and all that kind of good stuff at your disposal. It'll be downloadable, and I think that's it. Otherwise, look out for an email from me. I will email you through the course, and then I'll also post the email in the course content so you can read it there.
Yes. And since you guys really wanted to see some of the folders, I will try to do that when we film this thing again. Right? So you guys are getting kind of the raw interactive version. The non-interactive version will just be me talking, and you'll have it for reference. It's essentially the same, but it'll be shot with a team instead of just at my home studio here. So here's the assignment again, you guys. So I'm going to hide all this junk. Slide only and zoom in a little bit. Okay, so you guys are seeing that full screen. Okay, identify this. We're going to do this just because I think it'll be helpful for you to see the power of this. And you need to experience it for yourself. You should get really excited because you're doing this for you. And then imagine what your clients feel when you do it for them. So you're going to identify your desired customer. This is the person that you would like to get more work from today. Okay. Sometime in the near future, this is the person that you're going to get work from. You need to figure out what their world looks like, what they're thinking, saying, doing. That's your empathy map. Start going crazy on image buckets. Start filling it up with things that surround their world. And then define your brand attributes and then curate those images. Put them together. Pick 3 attributes. Use any one of the prompts, mild, medium, or spicy, or probably more likely rainbow, rhinoceros, rhombus. Make 1 stylescape. And if you wish, submit it for review. Use the hashtags future stylescapes in the future and mention me at the Chris Do, and then we will see it and then we'll review some of yours. Okay. Most likely I won't be able to critique that many of them because I want to go in as deep as I can to make it the best learning opportunity for you. But that's what I got for that. I think that's it. My boy's looking at me twice now. I think we're ready. I got to go eat lunch. I'm starving. Okay. Thank you, everybody. First of all, for being part of the Future community, for purchasing this course. I promise you guys, I try to give advice that's actionable, that's clear, that has potentially dramatic results. But the hardest part is to get you to do it. If only everybody that heard my voice did the things, 1/10 of the things I told them to do, they, I believe, would be in a much better position to go and crush it. Thanks very much, you guys. I'm out of here. See you guys next time.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.